Good morning, staff. Good morning, Wichita, and good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us for our Tuesday, November 26th meeting. I call this meeting to order. At this time, I would like to ask if you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Tony Zavala, opposition to the Gentlemen's Club opening in East Wichita.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. I just had a couple questions about how many people in this room get to have a say in these kind of clubs opening up in Wichita, or the expansion of existing clubs. I've noticed one sandwiched in between a couple of my favorite restaurants downtown that just moved in there and expanded. We got this big one going on up at 10,001 East Kellogg that's had some problems with crime before, and I'm definitely not a person without sin. But I have been working to get some of these people out of these types of clubs as they destroy families and spread a lot of the party doesn't stop. When the club closes, they take the stuff home, and it's just a tragedy to watch. And I didn't think that's the kind of moral compass that Wichita was going towards. So if anybody could elaborate on any of those questions, then I can take my seat.
Thank you, Mr. Tony. Go ahead. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. When it comes to businesses like that, it all depends on the zoning. So if it is a rezone to allow a business, you have an opportunity at your district advisory board meeting for the district it is, as well as at the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting, MAPC. Those are your two public opportunities before it comes to the council for a vote. Unfortunately, and I don't know in the case of this business, but sometimes there are zoning that allows that type of thing, and it just happens at that point. In this case, I think I remember it had to go through a rezone, but the opportunity is to do that at the District Advisory Board as well as MAPC, and you can reach out to your council member with your thoughts on that as well.
And also, oh, sorry, Mayor.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a gentleman, I don't want to point him out, but I'm going to right over there. He can answer a lot more, or your questions a lot better than we can as far as the zoning process, get into it a little deeper with you. So I'd recommend at least grabbing his card here real quick, or maybe chatting with him real quick. So, all right, thank you, Tony, appreciate it.
Thank you again. That was the first time we've had public agenda, I think, for folks who've been coming to workshops. After it got passed at the city council level, there is now public agenda that is allowed during a workshop meeting. So it is an opportunity for community members, again, to sign up or come to the council meeting and ask to speak. So at this time, since we have 4 spots left, are there any individuals from the community who would like to address the council? If you would, please state your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Richard Harris, former Civil Rights Commissioner for the City of Wichita, 3031 West Pawnee, number 200. My concern is that the city has taken way too long to develop a solution to the homeless problem. It has kicked the can down the road with one bureaucratic excuse after another. It has known now for at least 3 years that somewhere between 30 and 50 homeless people die on the streets of Wichita every winter from neglect by the people of the city of Wichita. The city has talked over and over about how it's got one grand solution after another, but it has ignored the fact that the first killing freezes happened in late October. All the shelters talk about opening in late November. And there were promises that the current shelter development was going to open in late November. And that promise hasn't been met. And the city is now talking, it seems, about the idea of taking away the only shelter that some of these people have from the cold that will kill them otherwise. That choice amounts to premeditated murder. And there's no excuse for it. There's no moral defense for it. There's no developer, there's no landlord whose life is so precious that we should kill the people who are homeless.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council. My name is Vince Hancock. I'm the president of the Delano Neighborhood Association. Our association is composed of anyone who lays their head in Delano. That would be landlords, renters, homeowners, and the unhoused. And I have friends amongst all of them. So I'm here to speak for some that maybe wouldn't feel comfortable speaking. Our homeless outreach team holds so much promise, yet so much disappointment. You'll see later in the presentation, I was told that we won't get a chance to speak on per agenda items, so this is for that agenda item. While our entire department, along with Parks and Rec and Public Works, have the authority to enforce the law, no one will do it. They all just say, oh, that's a hot team problem, and 99% of our police force just says, that deals with homeless, I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So if we're going to say in the policy, you have the authority to enforce that, then maybe we should work on some training to work with that. They just don't have the desire to deal with it. And yet when they do, the stories that I've heard that would just make you ashamed of the mistreatment and the humiliation that someone has, not because they're breaking a law, but because of how they're dressed, how they look. If I have one mission when it comes to this topic, it's to eliminate from the vocabulary the term suspicious character. There is no such thing. It is suspicious activity if someone is doing something wrong, but not because of how they look or how long the hair is on their face. It's inappropriate. In our neighborhood, I frequently monitor a tool that our city has called See, Click, Fix. It's a way for citizens to say, this doesn't seem right, and I think it may be something that the city can help me with. Our three most common topics are broken limbs, potholes, and encampments. And to a ticket, when these are created, the homeless outreach team opens at the ticket and looks at it and says, yeah, we'll work on that, and they immediately close it. The only department in the city to do so. When it comes to a pothole, they leave the ticket open, they get to it as fast as they can, and once the problem is resolved, then they close the ticket. This is inconsistent with the training by the communications department that set up the tool, yet they're the department that routinely says, yeah, we'll get to it when we get to it. There's no record keeping, there's no accountability for that department. We can do better. And lastly, on that subtopic, I do want to ask that we have compassionate enforcement. We've had a mix of non-enforcement through this travesty that the courts created called discretionary enforcement. It's also known as bias. If it's against the law, we need to enforce it. If it's not against the law, we need to leave people alone. Moving into the next topic of this is a statute that we're considering putting into our city ordinance that we're putting together. How are we going to know that that's ever going to make it onto the city's webpage? On August 20th, this body approved some changes to the elements of public comment. To this day, those changes are not on our city website. We have citizens, we have law enforcement officers who routinely use that website as this is the city's law, but it's not updated. There have been not one, but two Kansas Supreme Court losses for the city in the last 5 years where we were told as a city, this is not lawful, it is unconstitutional, it needs to be taken off the books. Guess what's still on the books? Gabrielle Gifford's case on disorderly conduct. we were told that a certain phrase is inappropriate to have in our city code. It's still on the website. And I've had the other details. I've been emailing this to some council members as early as April. Still hasn't been changed. We need to fix this. And I'm glad, I do want to say I am in support of the draft statute as it sits in front of you. I think it's a move in the right direction. I think we've got to get it codified, get it on the city website, and work together on implementation. Any questions? Thank you for your time.
My name is Patrick Murphy. I reside at 1786 South Seneca. This particular issue, I really wasn't planning on speaking on it today, but I didn't realize there were spots open. This particular issue strikes home for me. I have a 30-year-old daughter that is living on the street right now. And having programs available for her is obviously very important to me. I don't know if this gentleman's numbers are accurate. I would assume that they are. Her name is Mariah. She has mental health issues. And I think that when we talk about the homeless, we need to address that first. That is our number one problem in the homeless situation. We can build as many shelters as we want. We can put any ordinances in place that we want, but until we address what's going on in their minds and fix that, we're not going to achieve the goal that we want to achieve. I'm a person that is a fiscal conservative, but I'm a social liberal. I believe in social programs that need to be in place for people that people that need it, because it is needed. And we are one of the greatest countries in the world when it comes to taking care of our own. If you look at the world across, many other cultures, that we have a lot of things in place that they don't generally do. So I wanted to come here today and listen to the potential solutions. And I wanted to offer some advice in that area. I too suffered from mental health issues, and through certain practices and through the compassion of my community and my church and the grace of God, I have been able to overcome that, and I want that opportunity to be there for anyone else that's suffering in that way. So I asked this council to be open-minded to any and every solution out there. Anything that anybody offers, I ask that you hear them all. And then let's work together to make sure that we can effectively combat this serious issue. One of the potential solutions that I don't know, and I'm not sure what it even looks like right now, but one of the potential solutions is a housing program that requires participation from them in mental health areas. I don't know how effective that would be or exactly how to go about that. There are people that work in these fields that would be much more qualified to answer those questions, but it seems to me that it would be in the best interest of all of us to address the mental health issue first and make it as easy as possible for them to come in, as easy as possible for them to take these steps. I don't believe in the criminalization of anything that they are doing, just because without a doubt, I have never met a person that lives on the street that has chosen that. I think that they've fallen into a world that is very, very dark and very confusing. They're trapped in a labyrinth of their mind, and they're lost. And it's not their fault that they're lost, so we shouldn't be criminalizing anyone for what they're doing, but we should make it as easy as possible for them to come and be a part of our community in all these different ways. Anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for coming out today. It takes a lot to get up in front of people and express the experiences you've had. I have a close family member as well who's constantly in and out of homelessness and shelters. So I take everything you say to heart, sir, so thank you. And I do believe the numbers are pretty close to being correct. I think last year, 47 people maybe it was on the streets who did die during the year on the streets. So that's a number that is on our radar as well, and definitely something we're trying to address with the MAC opening here. We do plan on having COM care and other mental health services in there, having office space to help where we can, try and get people diagnosed, get them medicated where we can, and stabilized. And we are currently working on the housing piece as well. That's definitely a goal of ours, having something that if you go through the programs, if you're doing the things that you need to do to be stabilized and to get back on your feet, eventually you can end up in some affordable housing, hopefully on the campus or nearby the MAC. So we can continue with the services until they're ready to go and fully get integrated back into society. So again, thank you, sir, for coming up and talking today.
I too, Mr. Murphy, I'd like to just say that you and Mariah, your daughter, are in my prayers. Difficult situation. I don't want people's hopes to get up too high that this MAC is going to solve everything. It's not. The MAC is part of the solution. To your point, mental health, substance abuse are big parts of this problem too. So the idea is we have a comprehensive plan that the providers have come up with over the period of last, really almost 2 years now, come up with, in conjunction with housing and mental health and substance abuse. This plan will not be implemented in 1 day, 1 month. It's going to take 2 or 3 years to implement this plan. And there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be missteps, and we're going to learn from it, but we are going to get it right. So for people like your daughter who need the help. So, and I think there's a balance between, do you force someone going into treatment, or do you let them live on the street and die? I mean, it's not humane to let somebody live on the street in the cold with no bathrooms and allow them to be one of 47 to die. So what's that balance to give them the nudge to get help they need? So it's a very difficult situation, equation, and we are going to get there. So thank you for coming up and speaking.
Thank you again to our 4 individuals who wanted to speak during public agenda. Again, this is going to be a robust conversation. Unfortunately, during workshop, it's for the council to receive the information, but I highly encourage you all to always contact all your council members, and you can do so by emailing all of us at DL council members, plural, at wichita.gov, and that will go to all 7 of us. And again, I appreciate that there are many conversations regarding our individuals in our community who are unhoused and facing homelessness. I just came back from Union Rescue Mission this morning, and I can tell you that there are opportunities for individuals to have sheltering, even right now. And so I highly encourage people to connect to the organizations that are currently still providing that sheltering, including Union Rescue Mission and Humankind Ministries. And again, the Multi-Agency Center and Emergency Winter Shelter will open up next week on December 2nd. And we are wanting to be part of the solution. And you can see that these 7 individuals on this council are trying our best every single day to move forward together. But it does take a lot of collaboration. I know you mentioned mental health, and the health department belongs to Sedgwick County. ComCare belongs to Sedgwick County. We are two different governments, but we are collaborating. And that should give this community hope, because this council, along with the commission, are working together towards a solution with the providers in the community and all stakeholders in the community. So we're trying our best, and this today will be another step towards that. So thank you again for the public agenda portion. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next item?
Consent agenda items 1 through 11.
Council members, are there any items to be pulled for discussion? I have 2 items to pull, item 4A and 6A. I see no others, so I will move to approve all consent agenda items without 4A and 6A.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. I will start with agenda item number 4A. Good morning, Gary. I emailed this to you, so you're prepared for this question. I wanted to know, this analysis will now cost twice the amount of the initial analysis. Can you talk about, is this reasonable, and what do we expect to receive?
Sure. Good morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities. So our initial analysis was at a time when we were looking at options for what we might do for water restrictions. This was prior to actually moving into stage 2 of the water restrictions. We wanted to see if there might be other options to help encourage conservation. So we actually we only used not even quite half of that $20,000 at the time. It was a high-level analysis. It was done over a couple of months so that we could evaluate the highest level of conservation while being revenue neutral at the time, which is what we talked to the council at the time. This next effort is I think is the right price. We knew it would be more. We're going to work with them probably over almost the next 12 months to look at a lot of historical data and see what might make sense within these tier 2 and 3 levels that we've previously talked about for the same thing, to try to incentivize and encourage conservation, try to figure out where we can end up at a place that's most revenue neutral. One of the big parts of that we didn't have an opportunity to look at the first time was the impact to commercial customers. So, we've got 15,000 commercial customers. There are many of them that by necessity, by the nature of their business, they have non-discretionary water use that increases during the summer months. So they would see a significant impact if we raise the tier 2 and 3 rates. We want to see what that looks like, see if there's another way to go about that. Some examples we talked about was whether the commercial customers would be on separate irrigation meters, whether we could find a different way to apply rates to those customers. We don't know what that looks like yet, but that's why we need this bigger effort. I think the cost looks good.
One additional question I had was, will customers also be engaged in that process during this analysis?
I think we will need to, yes, especially some of the larger, well, maybe not larger, but the commercial customers that would be the most impacted. I think we can probably look at a sample set across that and try to have a better understanding what those impacts would be. So I would say yes.
Thank you, Gary. Any further questions for Gary? I see none. I'll move to item number 6A. I wanted to know about this program itself. So this is a change order that will now increase the budget by $530,000, and this is street pavement repair. Can you share over the last 2 years how much we've been spending on street maintenance/repair?
Sure. In 2023, We spent just over $12 million, about $12.1 million overall in street repairs through our outsourced pavement preservation program. Right now, our projection through the end of 2024 is pretty close to the same, just around 12 million, maybe a little bit over. We have a few projects that are yet to bid, some concrete street repairs. Once we roll in staff costs, any potential changes to those, I suppose it could be a little bit more, but we're projecting about the same, $12 million each year.
Is that roughly the same for 2025?
So the budget for 2025, we will be presenting the proposed 2025 outsourced pavement preservation program to the council on December 10th. The budget that's included in the CIP is $13.5 million for the program itself. Well, what we would look at is historically the program. This year, there's an additional $2 million for additional concrete street repairs. So we've got a total of $15.5 million. Now, keep in mind, that's got some costs in it for contingencies, for staff costs. Over the course of a year, what it takes to manage all of these projects, we probably end up being about $1 million of that in there for some of the soft costs associated with project management.
And again, this project specifically will now be $2.6 million, and it's for residential streets at near Harry and Rock, Central and Mays, and 29th and Amidon. Is that correct?
Correct. All residential streets, generally in those areas.
Thank you very much, Gary. I see no questions for Gary. I move to approve consent agenda items 4A and 6A.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Sorry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated November 25th, 2024.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, Josh Lauber, Department of Finance. The Board of Bids and Contracts convened yesterday, November 25th, for the following items. For engineering, we have our storm water sewer project number 804, stormwater sewer repairs for York and Mays for Wildcat Construction Company Incorporated in the amount of $47,350. For purchasing, we have the telescoping steel sign post systems for Centerline Supply for an estimated annual use of $36,058 for 1 year with 2 1 years. We have contract change order for janitorial services for various buildings for Lamar Crowder, DBA Crowder's Cleaning Service LLC for an amended price increase of $50 to cover the Murphin Dog Park. And we have Wilson Building Maintenance Incorporated for an amended price of $1,284 a week to include the Wichita Water Works maintenance building and also the old water treatment plant. We have the contract change order for manhole and inlet frames and covers for DC&B Supply Incorporated, estimated annual usage of $41,498. This is to include a sanitary sewer manhole cover that originally wasn't bidded. We have the utility line locate notification system through December 24 through November 25 for Kansas One Call System Incorporated, the estimated department usage of $200,000 in that period. We have the Etsy library shelving and installation for the Maya Angelou Library for H2I Group Incorporated for $93,500. And for airport, we have the solid de-icer for runways for Nature's Alpine Solutions LLC in the amount of $98,864. This is how to become a vendor with the city. If you'll see on your tables, I put some marketing materials if you could help us. Anytime you're out in the community, hand out a business card. There's a QR code of how to register with the city. We very much appreciate your help and the community's help of registering to do business with the city. These are the purchasing calendar events we have going on. If you're a small business, if you're a business that's new to the city that wants to do business with us, we'll be at these events and these times and these locations. You could also look on our calendar. These are open public opportunities out on the street today. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions, and I recommend your approval.
Any questions for staff? Can you go back to this one slide over? I think it said stump removal and tree one more. Is there one more? There it
Yep,
is.
tree and stump removal.
Can you explain that one for me?
Sure. Reggie, can you help me out with that sorry, Gary, it's for parks, our Parks Department and Forestry. It's for the removal and identified trees throughout the city. Thanks, Gary.
I think Gary Ferris, Park and Recreation, I think Josh pretty well summed it up. It's for dead tree removal and dead tree and stump removal. So the tree and including the stump would be removed as a part of that contract. It covers 9 square miles that are been identified as having the highest concentration of known work orders. And those are not contiguous square miles. They are just random square miles where we know that those work orders exist. So.
Hey, Gary, I appreciate it. So, appreciate all the work on this. This is a good way to get caught up. I think we're going to get caught up on the third, somewhere around a third of the dead tree removal that we have.
Yes, that contract represents about a third of what we have on the books.
Okay, and so they are doing the stump removal at the same time with
Yes.
the tree? Okay.
Yes.
I had some constituents reach out and ask about that.
Yes.
So, okay, appreciate it. Just wanted to make sure that's clear.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? I see none. I move to approve the Board of Bids and Contracts for November 25th, 2024.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Petitions for public improvements.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members, Paul Gunzelman of Public Works and Utilities. This morning I have some new petitions for your consideration. The signatures on the petitions represent 100% of the improvement district, and the petitions are valid per Kansas statute. Clear Ridge, second edition, located in District 2. The project will provide water improvements, stormwater drain improvements, sanitary sewer improvements, and paving improvements required for a new residential development. It is recommended that the City Council approve the new petitions and budgets, adopt the new resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures. I will stand for questions.
Questions for staff? I see none. I motion to approve the new petitions and budgets and adopt the new resolutions as well as authorize necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Council member appointments and comments.
Council members, any appointments or comments? Okay. I see none. I motion to adjourn. Okay, hold on.
Excuse me, we are going to have an executive session after workshop. So if you would wait to adjourn until that time, we can just go directly to workshop at this point.
Thank you, Jennifer. We will now pass the mic over to City Manager Layton to start the workshop for November.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 3 items for discussion, actually 4 items for discussion today. The first item is, has already been referenced, and that has to do with encampments and also solicitation in the city. This is part of a overall strategy now that we have taken steps to create the multi-agency center, excuse me. The council has said, what can we do to address the encampment issue now that we have a resource available to us? So staff has been spending a significant amount of time trying to work through all of the issues. How do we eliminate some of the problems created by encampments, but in a humane way, and I think we've found a good balance in that regard. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon Dickraff to present the ordinances for your review and comment.
morning, Sharon Dickraft, City Law Department. A little bit about the history of our camping ordinances. They were passed in 2013. At that time, the Wichita Police Department started what is known as the HOT Team. The team focuses on homelessness, and their goal is to connect people who are homeless with the necessary services and housing. The HOT Team and WPD officers have been the primary point of contact for enforcement of illegal camping ordinances. WPD policy currently is based on federal case law that limits charging illegal camping to situations where there is a shelter bed available and then the person refuses to go to shelter. WPD policy also currently requires that illegal campsites be posted for 72 hours prior to cleanup. Up until recently, the Wichita Police Department had a private contractor to assist with cleanups. Park has also been responsible for illegal encampment cleanups on park and other public property. A little bit about costs. These are costs for Wichita Police Department. So far in 2024, approximately $165,000 has been charged to the contractor fees. These costs do not include WPD staff time hours to post and assist the contractor with any cleanups. Parks has also been heavily involved in these cleanups. In 2024, Park cleaned up approximately 1,700 campsites, utilizing 1,300 hours of staff time and $33,000 in additional cost. Park has really detailed information on their website about the cost and their efforts to clean up these campsites. So I wanted to give a couple examples of illegal camping, and I chose these for a purpose. This first group is a less dense area as far as a population, not something that the public would have a lot of use for this property. These properties are going to be treated differently in the ordinances that is proposed. Versus this, which is a street in downtown Wichita. Clearly, the street and sidewalk is impeded. Traffic is impeded. People could not walk along those sidewalks. You will see in this picture, actually both pictures, the bright green notice. That is currently the process that PD is using, is that it is posted, then 72 hours later, it can be cleaned up. Since early 2023, members from a number of departments have been working together. As I think has been stated early, this is not a one way to fix homelessness. It's going to take a group effort of internal staff working with our partners in the community. WPD, Public Works, Park, Housing Services, MABCD, and Law were all part of the working group. A lot has been said about Grant Pass. Grant Pass was a Supreme Court decision which was decided recently that clarified what cities can do regarding illegal camping. The opinion held that sentencing provisions in this particular ordinance did not violate the Eighth Amendment. The court also held that there was no legal requirement that a shelter bed be available to enforce the illegal camping activities. This case came from the Ninth Circuit, which tends to be pretty liberal, and many cases from the Ninth Circuit limit what municipalities can do regarding these types of activities. Number of ordinances amendments are being proposed: illegal camping, camping in parks, aggressive and harassing conduct, and pedestrian conduct. Illegal camping, the revisions that you have, the definitions are refined and expanded to provide clarification as to what it is that we are trying to prohibit. The ordinance is revised to allow quicker cleanup at certain public visible locations, which is similar to the photographs that I presented: doorways, sidewalks, areas near bridges, bus shelters, playgrounds, and the MAC. These locations could be cleaned up without a waiting period or posted notice. For locations that are less visible, individuals will be given 48 hours notice to leave or clean up the property. If no one is present at those locations, the location will be posted with 48 hours to vacate. The notice will provide information on homeless services and the process to retrieve any property of value or identification information. If the person is present and refuses to leave and clean up the property, or has been told previously that they cannot camp there, the individual may be cited with a violation of the camping ordinance. The ordinance also outlines a process and procedure for the items that are seized or impounded. They require that staff, if we find any identification documents, any non-soiled workable items, that those be maintained for a period of at least 30 days. Items that are soiled, mildewed, broken, or inoperable do not have to be maintained. Parks will be responsible for storage and return of these items. Currently, I think the plan is to use a portion of Rounds and Porter to store these items for the 30 days. The ordinances also deal with illegal camping on private property. MABCD deals with issues of squatters quite frequently. This is to clarify where you can and can't camp on private property. It's prohibited unless you are the owner or you have written permission of the owner to camp there. It allows for temporary camping, which means if my parents come from Texas to see my son, they want to camp in their RV for 72 hours, they could do that with my permission. Camping is not allowed in accessory structures. We deal with individuals who live in vacant garages, vacant sheds, and then attempt to rent electricity from other locations. Those types of activities would be prohibited by the ordinance. Camping in RVs and trailers and cars is also prohibited. We do have some exceptions. One is if the parking lot is marked for overnight parking, if the vehicle is in a licensed RV park, or they have a license to park. Under the city's ordinances, you can get a permit to park an RV for up to 30 days through Title 26. The ordinance does allow for a more robust enforcement. WPD, Parks, Public Works, and MABCD. City manager is also authorized to designate other individuals to enforce the provisions. The penalties have been reduced somewhat. They were previously $500 and are 30 days in custody. We are recommending that we reduce that to $200. The court can also order community service. We have recommended amendments to that portion as well. The old version required the court to order a minimum of 10 hours. And some of these people, it would be questionable based on their mental health and other issues that they could do 10 hours of community service. The amount of community service would be left up to the court. Amendments are also proposed to clean up ordinances. Title IX is amended that all illegal camping will be regulated under Title V. Section 903-240 is amended that overnight camping of RVs is not allowed unless the park director approves. We are recommending that the aggressive conduct ordinance be repealed. In 2017, the ordinance was passed to prohibit aggressive conduct by individuals seeking to obtain an item from another person. Many of the actions in the ordinance are duplicative of other existing ordinances such as assault, battery, disorderly conduct. The ordinance has been rarely used by law enforcement, and we are recommending that it be repealed as part of this package. Lastly, we have a pedestrian safety ordinance. They are amended to address certain case law that allows people to stand in medians. The ordinance prohibits individuals from approaching cars in the roadway. It also prohibits conduct by pedestrians which impedes the flow of traffic. Other cities have indicated that they have had problems with TikTok challenges, that people will go and just stand and lay in the roadway to see how long it will take law enforcement to come. Provisions are also added to make parents responsible for children violating these ordinances based on safety concerns. It is recommended that the City Council review the recommended amendments and provide guidance to the city staff for next steps. I believe a member from each team that helped with the ordinances is here. So if I can't answer the question, I will refer to my experts.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions, and then I'll circle back with comments a little later. Do we know how many times we have used the aggressive conduct ordinance?
About 20.
20 in 6 years?
Actually, I have stats from 2020. From 2020 to the present, it's about 70 times.
70 times?
And I can say that many of those cases were dismissed because the facts did not fit the conduct. The conduct in that particular ordinance has to be that I am exchanging something or asking you to exchange something with me. Simply because I'm harassing you or following you or asking you a number of questions is not a violation of the ordinance. So we wanted to make sure that the facts fit the ordinance.
Okay, and WPD, you guys are comfortable with this change? Okay. How many have been charged for our camping ordinance? You said it's been pretty rare, so
Since 2020, there have been 5 cases.
5 cases. Do you have any background on any of those cases? Is it strictly homeless people, or?
I do not. My assumption, and I'm going to speak for PD, and Aaron can tell me if I'm wrong. Generally, they have not charged camping unless the person has had multiple warnings, have been given multiple opportunities to go to other places. They were hampered by, there had to be a bed in order to charge the illegal camping under their policy. So it would be my instinct that these are going to be your repeat offenders that we have told what the rules are, we have offered the services, and they're still saying we don't want to go.
Okay.
And I'll let Aaron come up and
All right,
correct me.
appreciate it.
No, I'm not going to correct you. Ms. Dickraff is correct. The limitations in the ordinance kind of hold back our enforcement efforts. Additionally, the complexity of the current ordinance has led us to really lean on the homeless outreach team to be the ones to sort of enforce the encampment ordinance. And that's something we tried to deal with through the review process, was making it easier for all of our officers to understand, to where they could look at it and enforce it on a broader scale if necessary.
Okay, and all these charges, they panned out in court. The judge, when it went through municipal court, do we know if the judge found them guilty of this, or?
I would not have that information.
Okay, yeah, that would be something I would be interested in, is just kind of background on that. And also, do we have, when we enforce these campsites, are we able to do we physically remove people if they are refusing to go, or?
I would say we can.
Yeah.
But that would lead to arrest.
Yes, I mean, under the current ordinance, if we have to physically remove somebody either for trespassing or a violation of the camping ordinance, it would be then that we're filing a charge either for trespassing or a violation of the camping ordinance. And right now, most of these situations, when you find the person illegal camping, you have to give them 72 hours to do something. So there is not an option currently under the ordinance NPD policy to have that immediate removal. You need to move on or you need to go someplace else.
Okay. Now, is this messing, or the RV changes that we have to the ordinance, is that messing with, because we currently have it to where you can't park an RV in somebody's driveway, if I'm not mistaken, and operate the RV out of the driveway, like during camper season or people coming to town to visit?
I'm going to look at MABCD or JR. There is storage of an RV, and then there is utilization of an RV. Currently, in Title 26, you can stay in an RV up to 4 days, and it does not have to be parked in a camp RV parking lot, the KOA. This acknowledges that process, but still allows some flexibility. I think MABCD and zoning allow the occasional, my parents come and they want to stay in my RV. Do I want to live permanently in my RV? Then the answer is no, you can't stay permanently in the RV. Either Title 26 is going to make you get a license, or under this ordinance, once you've got to that 72-hour limit, then you are no longer temporarily camping. And I will refer to Kaylin, who's my expert.
Thanks for the question, Mike. So the inclusion of this in this particular updated ordinance will allow us to address those instances where, almost by magic, decrepit RVs appear on vacant lots or in areas where they should not be. There's obviously no structure around that's inhabitable, and people are trying to live in them or do crime from them. So currently, we don't have a good way to address that. This will allow us to get at those situations a little bit more quickly. Again, that's what this is for. It's not meant to prevent people from storing their RVs during use season, as Sharon said, or we call it the mother-in-law use, when somebody maybe has they have a baby and somebody needs to come in and stay with them for a couple of weeks. They want to park their RV temporarily. There's provisions for that more traditional and legal use for that. This is to get at those other things that are so not traditional and involve usage that crime and problem with properties grow around and in. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And then when we talk about community service, is that a $20 an hour rate? It's a $200 fine, and we're saying 10 hours of community service to pay that off?
The current rate of community service is set at, I believe, $8 an hour, and that's by the court. The ordinances in Title I give the court the authority to set the rate for community service. And I know in the fireworks ordinance, it was higher than that. This particular ordinance, it would be based under the Title I, which would be $8 an hour.
Okay, so if they get a fine of up to $200, that would be 25 hours of community service?
Approximately.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, during the presentation, it was said 10 hours, so I just wanted a little bit of clarification on that one.
The prior ordinance required that if community service was going to be ordered, that it was a minimum of 10 hours, which, and I'm not sure why that was in the ordinance that way. Certainly if the court wants to order 5 hours of community service and see if they can do 5 hours of community service, or in most instances, the individual is approved for community service. Sometimes they'll do 5 hours, sometimes they'll do all 20, and that depends upon the court and how that community service is ordered.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Quick question. How will this be enforced if a person just continues to move around the corner? Will they be allowed to just, let's say, okay, you've got to leave, then they move to around the corner, then they move to another corner, another corner?
We tried to address that with, if it's posted within the line of sight, it doesn't have to be reposted. Now you are correct that if I'm on First Street and then I move around to Main Street, if I'm a significant distance away from the first place where it was posted, we would probably post again. However, in those types of particular areas, we are recommending that we don't have to post those, and we can tell the person they just need to move along and or then clean up whatever's left behind. If that makes sense.
Okay, so it really doesn't solve that, really?
It does from the standpoint of in your highly populated areas, we're not requiring the 48-hour notice.
Okay.
So if the police department saw the person there on First Street and said, like the picture with the plywood bed, would tell that person, you need to get your things and you need to go. So that's kind of their warning. Now, are we realistically going to have a truck behind the officer when they do that? No. So there still is going to be some lag time before we get out there to clean those things up. So it's not an immediate seizure in most of these cases, because we're not going to be that interconnected between the cleanup process and the police department. We're just not going to have that mandatory wait to make that call to parks to say, we have a cleanup on First and Main.
Okay. And the last thing I just point out is there is an option just to do community service with no fine.
Yes. Yeah, yes.
These
I mean,
people don't have any money.
Yeah. The court can order community service in lieu of the fine. So if they, and it's up to $200. It's not $200. So if the court wanted to order an $80 fine and community service is $8 an hour, they would do 10 hours of community service.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we are trying not to penalize these folks.
Right.
Which is why the recommendation is to reduce it from the $500 maximum to a $200 maximum.
Right, okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a few questions. Councilmember Hoheisel must have took my notes. So on the community service hourly rate, I know we had talked about that maybe last year or the year before. Is there any way to make that like across the board the same, at like $20 an hour and not the $8 an hour?
You could amend section 104 and set that amount. That would be taking away the discretion of the judge to set that amount. There are some state statutes that do have amounts set that are $8 or $10. I would think under our home rule, if we wanted to give more credit, we could. But that would be an ordinance change that you could make. Or you could order the community service be higher in this ordinance. The problem with that is then from an equal protection standpoint, if I got a DUI and I'm only working for $8 an hour and he's homeless but he's working for $20, where's the parity there? It would be better from a legal standpoint to change Title I if the council wanted to raise that amount.
Okay, I just think $8 an hour is a little low at this point. On slide 38, so I think your numbers are different. When you looked at the process for seized items, I know that the soil, the mildew, broken and inoperable things don't need to be maintained, but what if that has a deeper meaning to someone who is unhoused? It's something that in many ways keeps them sane, whether it's some toy or some photograph. Is that something that will be taken into account to not just get rid of?
I would say if the person is present, perhaps. If the person isn't there, I don't know how the contractor or Parks is going to know. And we have to set some sort of, as objectively as we can, standard for what we're going to keep and what we're not going to keep. If the animal wasn't soiled, stuffed animal wasn't soiled, wasn't mildewed, wasn't wet, we'll take pictures of everything that we do seize. And we're going to, work on guidelines for the people that are cleaning those up, but you're asking the contractor to guess what is important to that person. And we try to have as much objectivity as we can when we do these cleanups. So the short answer is, can I guarantee that that animal will be maintained? I can't. Okay. Oh, Aaron's gonna hop on.
Thank you, Councilmember. The storage and retention of property was a large focus of the conversation of the entire group because we are sensitive to that issue. One thing we talked about is the change in the posting sticker itself to say your property was taken, this is where it was taken to, this is where you can get it. We've talked about options of where that's going to be. I don't know that we're settled on that yet, but that was a major topic of discussion. As far as the soiled property, obviously we have to, there's a balance there, right? Because we are going to have city staff as the ones cleaning up this property, and so we need to make sure that city staff remain safe in that process. But that was a topic of discussion for the entire group of what's the best way to manage this and ensuring that the unhoused population, if their property is taken, know where to go get it.
Okay. While you're up there, the impounded items that must be kept a minimum of 30 days, what if someone does happen to go to jail or something comes up where it puts them at the 30 days, but we know that they're in custody? Is there an exception for that they still have an opportunity to get their stuff?
Yeah, so I would say if someone is arrested, we would likely handle that property differently than just an encampment cleanup. right? So if a person is arrested and they have property on their person that we can't take to the jail and book into the jail with them, then that is property that would go to our property and evidence and be handled through a different function than just property seized during an encampment cleanup. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay. On the next slide, I don't know if that's you or Sharon. So the temporarily camp being defined as not more than 72 consecutive hours, is there an ability to rotate? So if I stay there 70 hours and I go to another site across the city, but I then come back to that private property, does my clock restart for 72 hours?
I would say yes, but you have to have permission of the property owner. So if I have a cousin that lives at 13th and Mays, I can do 72 hours there. If I have another cousin that lives at Rock and Central, I can do 72 hours there. So we're trying to limit the amount of time, and the real goal of this is to limit the camping in the RVs that are in many times inoperable, that get driven or towed to a vacant lot and parked there. That's really the focus of this ordinance. We had to recognize, so that we weren't too broad, that there are the mother-in-law exception or my parents from Texas exception for those instances where we want to allow some temporary camping on property.
Okay. My last question, at least at the moment, is I understand, I believe, what is spurring some of these revisions from the court decision, but if there's no requirement for some bed for someone who's unhoused, then where will they go?
I mean, and this is probably an Aaron question. I mean, the hot team or the officer is going to contact that person and advise them that they're in violation of the ordinance. They're going to be given information about what resources are available. If there is not a bed and the person wants to go to a bed, I would think that the officer or ICT team would work to find a location for that person to stay. And Sally may have some other comments. Sally's sticking her head. Some other comments, but I think the first goal would be to find that person housing if we can, and if the person wants to go. And then the next step would be those cases where the person doesn't want to go, doesn't want to move, doesn't want to clean up. At that point, this ordinance will give those people that are out in the field additional tools to deal with those situations.
So essentially taking their stuff and they're left with nothing to go find somewhere else to go.
I'd like Sally to address the number of beds that we're going to have in the MAC, because we do have an increase in inventory in beds available. Of course, significantly more during inclement weather, both in the winter and the summer with the MAC, and the ability to flex into higher capacity.
And I believe, and I'm going to ask Sally to talk about this too, that there are planned areas at the MAC for them to store their things. So the goal is not to take their things. The goal is to get them hooked up with the services, but also allow businesses and people to use the sidewalk to walk down the street. So we're trying to balance those, and it is a tricky balance. And staff has worked really hard on this. These aren't great, magical tools, but they are tools to try to improve where we're at now.
Yeah, my main reason for the question, Sally, as you come up, though, is because the council will see this before the MAC, the full MAC is open. So between now and then, what is that solution until then? I'm more comfortable with this in April when it's open fully. Right now, I have some concerns, but.
It won't be open fully in April of 2025 for sure. Actually, it'll probably have reduced capacity in April as the construction for build out of the MAC happens. We actually expect that the capacity may actually decrease as of April 1st. So for this winter currently, we have space for up to 230 people in beds. If the numbers were to increase beyond that, I mean, we're really thrilled with the work that McCown Gordon has gotten done to get other areas of the building sprinkled. So there would actually be physical space if we needed to put down mats. At that point, though, we would be challenged in operational costs, because it would increase the number of staff and things in new areas to have more people. Last year, the highest number we had was 192 on a single night. If we are, my expectation is we're going to see higher than we saw last year. We're seeing more people in need for all programs, to be honest with you, as COVID resources dried up. So I do think we may see more numbers than we saw last year, and is why we pushed to get 230 beds in the space right now. And again, if we have to go to mats, we hope not to, but that's going to be a conversation to the community to say, hey, demand is more than anticipated. We are going to need more help to get this done. The full build out of the MAC isn't going to be completed till sometime in, hopefully by the end of 2026, truly. Working with the construction company and our developer partner, it's going to be a challenge to be able to do the construction of the facility while still serving people for shelter. And so it is going to be very disjointed at times as we have to move people to other areas of the building so that renovations can occur. So, okay.
Appreciate that. I guess my concern is slightly alleviated with 230, but until the full build out, if we get to a point where there is nowhere for someone who's unhoused to go and get the help that they need because of a lack of beds, and we've now changed enforcement. I just don't know what that looks like, but thank you.
Agreed.
Quick question for you, Sally, before you get seated. Sorry, I was just trying to catch her. Was there any day last year where the emergency shelter is beyond capacity?
No, actually, last year we had capacity to 230. We had that many beds. 192 was the max that showed up.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Mayor, can I continue with other questions? This is for Sharon. Process for seized items, all of that is new, codified into law. If this were to pass, this is all new ordinances that we would be held to a higher standard of what we have to collect, correct?
Yes, and it's more transparent for the people whose items we do impound, that they will be told, the notice is going to say, contact ABC department at 12345 to get your things back. And we have a more detailed process than we do right now for those items.
Okay, and the notice will also provide information about the location of the emergency shelter or location of the MAC?
It will provide information on homeless services, the HOT team, as well as information about the MAC and how they can get services.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other comments. I just want to say thank you to all the staff that prepared this. I think this is comprehensive. I think it takes everything. I think it models compassion and enforcement. And so I just want to thank everybody that worked on this. And I think it's a solid document.
Thank you, Mayor. Sally, sorry, I tried to catch it too. If there's any justice in the world, I'd be the one doing all those steps. I think I need it more than most. Could you describe the shelter beds open for people under 18 because they're not eligible at the MAC? Also, shelter beds open for women's only or family as well?
Sure. So anybody with minors under the age of 18 would be referred to other partners in the community that serve families. That could be Wichita Children's Home, it could be St. Anthony Family Shelter. Domestic violence could be Catholic Charities Harbor House or Wichita Family Crisis Center. There's definitely still a need for additional shelter and services to families, but we had to balance the ability to serve individuals and the risk that that could pose to children under 18 when we're not doing background screening for people to actually get into the shelter.
Are there any spaces available? I know St. Anthony's is full to the gills, Family Crisis Center.
Family Promise has a unique model in which they work with churches that have sponsoring families that take other families in. So their capacity really ebbs and flows, but they are the ones that are usually coming to the table when the other shelters are full.
Okay, and that's, just to elaborate a little, that's one of the concerns I have as far as doing away with the beds available to people, is that there might be people who are fleeing domestic violence, perhaps people who are escaping the sex trade, and they may not be comfortable or willing to go to the MAC where it's men and women there. So doing away with that and kind of taking away the ability for people to wait until beds are open for what's appropriate for them. That is a concern of mine as far as the shelter beds go.
When someone identifies that they're fleeing domestic violence or are a victim of trafficking, we absolutely try to connect them with those experts that understand the challenges associated with that. So that is definitely, there's a Ranch Hope for Women, Wichita Family Crisis Center, Harbor House. Those are the better place for folks in those scenarios to be than a general shelter, for sure.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the work they do. It's definitely needed. I'm just concerned with the availability of beds, because again, they're full up as well already. I know we had a case a couple of months ago where it was a decent-sized family trying to look in vain to find somewhere, they had kids along with them. So I'm just voicing a concern that I do have with that aspect of the ordinance as well.
Oftentimes, people with children won't present themselves to shelters for fear of having the children taken away by DCF also. So, yeah, we have to be very cautious of that happening too.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this would be a good time for me to go ahead with the rest of my thoughts, or? Yeah, go for it.
Not a
Sally,
question
can you
for Sally.
Yeah, more questions for Sally, I think.
No, I had one question for Sharon, actually. This is my last question. I forgot this note on my page. For slide, I should have wrote that number down. This was the pedestrian safety slide. The bottom point, provisions are added to make parents responsible for children violating these ordinances. So I was excited, it's not the word, eager to see this happen, just because I see a lot of kids standing on corners, running out into the middle of the street, trying to get money from cars for youth sports or whatnot, and I think that's dangerous. So if there is a team on a corner and kids are participating still and running out in the street to get money from cars and impeding traffic, are the parents of those kids who are not present going to be cited for those kids out in the street?
Currently, the ordinance is written that it is knowingly, so we would cite the parents that would be on site.
Okay.
And certainly if the minors are running out in the street, we can at least at this point tell the minors, you can't do that. Tell the other parents that are there, you can't do that. Because yes, I share your concerns. 21st of May's, a little kid's gonna get hit because they're running out in between the multiple lanes. And it's not safe.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm done now.
Sally, I'm really looking forward to the emergency winter shelter opening up next week. Can you give us one more time? So right now, how many shelter beds are currently in the system versus how many will be next week, when an additional 230 beds will be available for men or women over the age of 18?
I don't have the total across the spectrum number. I mean, we can, Humankind Inn has 60 beds that are available for men, women, children, families year-round. Union Rescue Mission, they say at this point their capacity is 40, but they are very much known for putting cots down. I think last I heard they were at 53 people staying at the rescue mission. Harbor House and Wichita Family Crisis Center, because they deal with families and families stay in units, the number of people all the time varies. But then adding 230 beds is going to be huge. Absolutely having beds available for women in particular, because as of right now, if it's not a domestic violence situation and there's no room at the inn, there's really no place for them to go. So we saw an average of 1 woman for every 4 men last year, which is an uptick over the last 10 years, really creeping up the number of women experiencing homelessness. And those are individual women, not families, because the families come through a whole different path. So.
Now I'd like to ask a couple more questions really now for Sharon. It's regarding, can you actually go to the slide so that, it's the slide regarding illegal camping, section 5.20.010. So it says publicly visible locations. I would say that they're public safety concern locations rather than publicly visible. They are public safety concerns in front of doorways, sidewalks, underneath bridges, walking paths, biking paths, bus shelters, playgrounds, as well as the MAC. Can you address, is this limiting to just those locations? And can you talk about how those locations will have immediate cleanup?
The immediate cleanup is limited to those locations. There are different feet ranges between the locations. Restrooms and bus shelters, for example, have a much shorter radius. We don't want people camping or living in our public restrooms or in the bus shelters. As you go out, parks, playgrounds, it gets to be 500 feet. I think we ended up with 500 feet for the MAC. And in the process, or the thoughts of that is, and you are correct, safety concerns for people utilizing those facilities, safety concerns trying to get in and out of a building, property owners' rights and interests in having free ingress and egress to their businesses. So yes, I mean, those are areas that there are public safety concerns, as well as areas that are more, and publicly visible probably wasn't the best term, but more likely to be used by the public than the trees behind a park, for example.
I just want that to be made clear that it was not just being public, but
Right.
rather it's a public safety concern, and these are why those will be immediate cleanups. Can you also address how that process would work if we see if an individual in our community, a neighbor, sees a campsite underneath a bridge, what will the steps now look like if this ordinance passes?
They would then call 911. I'm looking at Aaron. They would then call 911. A police officer could be dispatched who would take a report. If there are people there, then they would be advised that they needed to leave. In a lot of instances, there aren't people there. There are just items there. Then at that point, they would reach out to parks or indicate to parks that the area should be cleaned up. Aaron's shaking his head. And the benefit of those areas is that you don't have to wait the 72 hours. Previously, the hot team or whoever would go out, post it for 72 hours. They would come back, 4 or 5 days later, more stuff was there or less stuff was there. So we're trying to expedite these cleanups, although I would be lying if I said it's going to be the same day, same time. We don't have the resources to clean up. What did parks clean up? 8,000 campsites over the last 4 years.
Along those lines, I think what you're getting at is policy versus ordinance, right? And ordinance obviously affects policy, and that was another part of the discussion that we had as the group, which is we wanted to draft the ordinance, get it to council, get feedback on the ordinance, see where the ordinance landed, and then I think everybody has an understanding, all of the parties that were at the table anyway, that internal policies are going to have to change to mirror the final ordinance. So once we get the ordinance approved and we know what's in that ordinance, then it becomes an internal matter for us within our departments and to work together to make sure all of our policies are consistent in how this is going to be enforced. So that has been a part of the conversation as well.
And this question may be more for Bob, if that's okay. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but, it was brought up, we have, 8,000 cleanups in the last year, which was, and I'm glad that it's on the Park and Rec website, and I appreciate that, and I'll make sure I let people know. So we would anticipate if this passes that we will have more cleanups, I would assume?
I think that's a safe assumption.
Yeah, okay, and so if we spent, and I can't find it, in 2023, 178,000, 164,000 so far, what will be the steps that we will take to increase also the budget for this, right? Because if we have more cleanups, that means more budget items. So has that been a thought at all, and what would be the plan for that?
Yes.
Thank you.
The council approved 2025 budget, anticipates a change in our approach. And so we are going to de-emphasize the use of contractors. We're using contractors right now on a month-to-month basis and on an interim, for an interim period until we get all of the equipment that's necessary for us to do city staff cleanups. But the Parks Department will have a crew that will be designated for the encampment cleanups, and that money is all incorporated in the budget. We're just waiting, I believe, for the equipment to arrive. We already have the staff identified who will be part of that team. And so I'm not quite sure, Reggie or Gary, what the timetable is on that, but if you remember, we had several pieces of equipment we identified that will help us do a better job, actually, of cleaning up.
We've designated a crew, like Bob mentioned, that we're going to have 4 people that's going to manage that process for us. So we're actually posting positions this week for those positions, with anticipating having them on board in January. We work with Fleet Management Services, looking at getting the equipment that we're needing for that, and we're anticipating having that within the first quarter of the month of next year. And in that transition, we'll continue to work with a contractor who's providing the service on an as-needed basis until we're able to manage that process internally.
So we're doing this month by month, right? The contract for cleanup still?
Yes, that's correct.
So do we have it up until December of 2024? We'll probably use that contractor?
We'll probably use that contractor into the first quarter of 2025. We'll have a staff, but we're still waiting on the equipment.
Can you tell us how much that is?
Reggie, I don't know if you know what the monthly cost is running.
If I'm not mistaken, as Gary may be able to verify, right, I think we have designated right now $50,000 that we have. That's up to our budgetary spending amount to be able to use for a contractor in the interim.
So 50,000 for how many months?
We're looking at the first quarter until we get the
So 3
team in
months?
place. Yes, roughly 3 months.
Last 2 questions, these would probably be for Sharon. They're actually about the language of the actual ordinance. So on page 5, when it's just talking about the MAC and about the distance regarding playground equipment, schools. It does list the MAC as 50 feet of the building and property, not 500. At least my reading of this is, it's section 4, item number 7, it looks like. So when we're having conversations, I'm probably more comfortable with the 500 feet. The 50 feet would be pretty close around the perimeter, and I think we've talked to the neighbors, and there are concerns about that process. So maybe at 500 feet to match the playground equipment, schools, childcare facilities. That would just be one thought.
We talked about that, and I think the goal is that we want the people to come inside of the MAC. And I think we also need to remember that this is camping. We're still going to have the option of people with their items wanting to go in and from the MAC. So the 500 feet, and you're correct, it's a huge lot. So whether you do the 500 feet from the building or whether you do the 50 or 100 feet from the exterior premises, and that can be cleaned up. We had multiple conversations about these distances, and I can work with Sally to see if it should be, in her opinion, more than the 50 or 100 feet.
I trust your guys' recommendations. There's 5, 6 departments on this, and so whatever you feel comfortable with. I just know that was a concern of neighbors when they came prior as well.
And that was one of the reasons why it was added.
Okay.
What was, one, from the public safety standpoint, and 2, just the neighborhood cohesiveness of having that in that particular neighborhood.
Perfect. I trust your recommendation. I'm on page 6. This would be section 6, item C. So it talks about in the event personal property poses an immediate threat, and then it lists what items might be immediate threats. So blood, bodily fluids, feces, urine. What I don't see on here, and that I have seen at encampment sites, is weapons. Just generally, I know that there's like a bow and arrow at one when I walked by that was just easily accessible for anybody to grab when they walked. And so if there's a weapon or a gun, obviously an abandoned gun along the river, I think there are probably other laws that protect that too, but I would see that as a classification or C as well.
Yeah, we would certainly, if there's a weapon, we would, at that point, especially if it's a gun, we would contact PD, and they would impound it so that they can do ballistics on it to make sure it's not been involved in any sort of homicides or through the BN process.
Okay, those are my only other thoughts. Thank you.
Any further questions for staff? I see none. Again, thank you so very much to all the departments who've been working hard at this ordinance. This is a revision to the ordinance that currently is in place, and I think it takes into consideration both compassion and enforcement, and so I'm really appreciative of all the staff who worked on it.
Mayor, if I can make a comment. I want to address Councilman Johnson's concerns about not having enough room. There's no way, if we have 700 people-ish that are homeless, there's no way we're going to do a sweep of the city in a month and throw them in jail or make them go to the MAC. I've talked to providers, on the Homeless Task Force, providers. That's just not feasible. It's going to have to be a phased-in approach to keep people in the system, get them into housing. The big bottleneck is going to be housing. That's all this other stuff is something, but the big bottleneck is going to be housing. We don't have enough affordable housing, and that's where the emphasis really needs to be for the council, is how we figure out to get enough housing for these people. So I don't think we've paid enough attention to that, and I think we're going to have to, and the sooner the better.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Council Member. I wasn't going to get into the weeds, but again, the challenge when I speak about beds is, again, even if they're available, we talked about this earlier this year. We had a young lady come speak to us who worked directly with unhoused folks, not at a high level, but on a grassroots level. And we also have to find ways to build trust to get folks into the MAC. So my question again would have been, if someone is unwilling to come in because they don't trust it, or maybe they've been in the shelter before and some bad things have happened and they don't come in, where are they going to go? What's going to happen? Now, that's something that will generally be there no matter when the full MAC is open or not, but I just look at right now, those concerns to me from folks I've talked to and folks I've seen are a real challenge. I definitely agree with housing. We got to find something to do with housing and to get folks stable and into housing. But when it comes to, as this can be enforced differently now, and there is no requirement to have any space and no real push to that, because that's one of the things you could tell someone is, hey, we got a bed for you right now. Now you don't have to. It's just getting things cleaned up. I mean, even to the point of, I know the mayor said this, another perspective on publicly visible is we've heard from people who just don't want to see it. So there's the get this cleaned up now. I don't want to see someone unhoused. I don't want to see some of the challenges this country faces. We want to see everything is beautiful and clean grass and everybody's got a job and happy, but that's not necessarily the case. And I think that, again, some of these changes I feel, and I get emails, I've sent some to the hot team recently from a few people in District 1. I just think it's going to be more, get all this cleaned up, we don't want to see it, and then where are these individuals going to go? And I know that our officers and hot team are compassionate, and park staff and MABCD, but at some point with the demands of people saying, get this cleaned up, we don't want to see it, what's going to happen? It's just a concern I have, and I hope that it's a wrongly placed concern, but I have a feeling it's not.
Mayor, I'll give brief remarks. This is the #1 issue that I hear from constituents. I get a call about homelessness every single day. And so as the emergency shelter opens, I believe we should implement this as soon as possible in January with an increased capacity of 230 beds. If we don't, we're also going to lose trust of the public, and I think support for the MAC and emergency shelter, that if we're providing millions of dollars of resources for individuals and they don't see a change on the streets, we're going to lose the trust of the public regarding enforcement and accountability. I think we need this for the winter months as well. Those are, when we talk about people dying on the streets, it's because they're not in shelter space. It's because we're not encouraging them to go to shelter space. And so I think that has to be paramount in this as well. I wrote along with the hot team once maybe twice. I went to a couple of the cleanups that they were doing as well, and so I'm very thankful that we're moving the cleanups from contractors as much as possible to city staff. You know, when I was helping out, I was given just latex gloves from a contractor. I know that we're going to be taking care of our staff when they're out there cleaning the facility, so I feel that's a good move for the safety. You're dealing with sometimes things that can be dangerous in cleanup. So I'm thankful for that as well. Again, I want to thank Wichita Police Department, MABCD, Public Works, Parks, Law, and Housing. I think this is a collaborative effort, and if all of you are proposing this, I trust that this is a solution to the challenges we face. If we can get everybody on the same page and propose this, I'm confident that this is a good thing. Again, we're adding 230 beds, and instead of just compassion and enforcement, I think we should be talking about compassion and accountability as well. Allowing people to live on the streets when we're providing a safe, warm space with life-changing resources is neither compassionate or equitable for our community. And I think this is the only way to be compassionate, equitable, and see compassion and accountability. So thankful for all the work that's been done on this.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate the staff's work on this. It's not an easy task, I guarantee you. What I think is important is to get, and we've got a 501c3 set up for the MAC, and is to get that management of the MAC set up before April 1st. So get the person in place that's going to be in charge of it, start building those relationships to where he can help people like Patrick Murphy's daughter, Mariah. Because right now that's very a loose help. To have a more structured way to help that person, whether it's navigators that are hired by the director of the MAC to help that process, to move it along, I think that's extremely important. I'm not sure we're going to have much of that this winter. It'll just be a winter shelter again. The sooner we can get that management set up, get that person hired, get that person to give definite roles to all the nonprofits of how they're going to work together and integrate their services together. I think that's going to be very, very important. And I think it'd be money well spent to get that set up before April 1st.
If I could just respond to that, Mayor. Next week, on Tuesday, you'll have an agreement with MAC Inc. for operating assistance, the $5 million allocation, and that will include funds for administrative support to stand up the structure necessary to be able to operate the facility.
Do you want to go? Thank you. Thank you again to all the departments who have been mentioned. Truly appreciate it for everybody working on this. I just a few thoughts. And it's been alluded to, but I have people say to me, why would somebody not go to a shelter? Why would they choose to sleep on the street when it's freezing cold and they don't have their basic needs? And that's a really difficult question to answer because I'm not in their shoes. And people who are suffering from mental health issues, from substance abuse issues, from being a victim, may not be able to make the most rational decisions when they are in that situation. So while I appreciate this discussion and I'll look forward to more and look forward to hearing more from community members and talking with my colleagues, I just want us to manage our expectations that adding the emergency winter shelter with 230 beds doesn't mean that encampments are just going to go away. We're still going to have it in our community, and I think we need to figure out a way to communicate to the residents of Wichita and our visitors what we are doing, but then also what may not be able to happen. Just another thought too, we talk about doing the point-in-time count and how many people are identified on the street as being unhoused, but I think we often forget about the people who are couch surfing or living in cars or those that we just can't see. And so I hope that when the MAC opens, I hope it's wildly successful, but not only the people who are actually unhoused and living on the streets, but I hope we're trying to figure out a way to reach out to all of our community members, that the MAC would be open for everyone. I think that there's lots of different situations regarding homelessness, and I'm proud of us as a community that we're coming together with the non-for-profit, the for-profit, public entity with the city of Wichita and the county, hopefully the state, everybody working together, the private industry, that's how we're going to address this. But it's definitely not an easy solution, and it's certainly an issue that I think we're going to be addressing for years to come. But thank you to everyone who's working on it and provided input for us.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments here. I appreciate the fact that the hot team does have some discretion. Vincent, I love you, man. You are extremely detail-oriented and organized. I appreciate that, but we can't take the humanity out of government. So I do appreciate that the hot team does have some discretion about the proper time and place to enforce some of these. I just want to echo my concerns about the shelter beds. Not every shelter bed is appropriate for the people. And again, I keep thinking of the women fleeing domestic violence. Also, the property concern, I do think maybe if we could come up with another tier for like the straight personal effects, like pictures maybe that somebody's had for a couple of years, maybe of their loved ones or something like that. If we can extend that for maybe 6 months or so, because we don't know. I think some people will get swept up in some things. Maybe they will get into mental health programs or rehab programs, and then eventually come around to missing some of those items. Also birth certificates, IDs, and whatnot. If we can try and keep a hold of those as...
We're keeping those.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. As far as the fines and possible jail time, I would support that if I honestly thought that was going to help get people into the MAC. I have doubts about that will actually force people in there. I think for some in our community, that's more what Councilmember Johnson referred to, just maybe a tool to actually get rid of some of the blight they don't see. And I can appreciate people not wanting to see it, but concern number one is just actually how can we effectively change these people's lives who are experiencing homelessness. One thing I would like to look at, I haven't heard any conversation, I don't know if we looked at this in our meetings or not, but possibly setting up a homeless court, the same way we have drug court and mental health court working with county on some of these. I know some communities around the country have it. This way it could be a little more effective towards the needs of the people going through this process. Maybe there's some good ideas or ways to actually get people into the programs that they need through homeless court. So I would like to kind of see any thoughts and ideas on that front and what that might look like going forward. So again, I thank you, staff. The last 3 years, I've learned that your jobs are way more difficult than mine. We get to be the face of everything here, but you guys are the ones doing the work, and I really appreciate everything you guys do. So thank you.
Just last question, really, it's either for Sharon or the city manager. What are the next steps then? If this is now discussed in workshop and you've gotten some guidance from this council, what are the next steps and when can we see this ordinance come before us for a vote?
Mayor, I think the suggestions for refinement are minimal. So it really depends on your wishes. We could do it as early as December 17th, or we could do it in early January.
So I'll speak for myself only. I believe that by December 17th, we will have 2 weeks into the the emergency winter shelter. So it would be an appropriate time to bring this up before the council on December 17th.
The only concern I have is I don't think you have a full council that day, so
I'm more comfortable with January since I won't be present for the 17th, or I'll be joining remotely. But if that's the only day that works for the body, I'm planning on joining remotely for that meeting. So
it's your desire. We can do it as from the 17th on.
I'll be absent that first meeting in January. My son's getting married in Vietnam, so.
17th is fine.
I will not be joining remotely.
I can make the 17th work. I'll join remotely.
I would be all right with later in January as well, if that fits council members Glasscock and Johnston's schedule, so.
I think I'm leaning towards, Bob's looking, I think I'm leaning towards into January, and the rationale for this decision, and, you know, I haven't had a lot of thought because we just got asked, but just to see how the shelter is going, to see what lessons were learned, how cleanup and encampments are going, especially with the new crew. I think erring on the side of having a little bit more time to assess the situation makes sense to me. Thank you.
I would say January too.
Is there a desire from fellow council members to run this through our district advisory boards, just to get comment from them as to what their thoughts are?
I've brought it before my district advisory board in terms of what they would like to see, not the specific language, but these are reflection of what I've talked to my district advisory board. I think people want us to make decisions from this bench, and we've talked about this for years at this point about what people want to see in terms of ordinances enforcement. So I prefer for a vote as soon as possible.
I'm good either way. I think we'll get a lot of feedback at DABS, maybe some potential additional revisions, but either way, I'm good, as long as it's January or after.
So it looks like only Dalton, or Councilmember Glasscock and I,
I would. December would be better.
and Councilmember J.B. Johnston are asking for it to come sooner rather than later. But it looks like we're now split. We need Councilmember or Vice Mayor Ballard to chime in because we're split 3-3.
Mayor, we could always bring it up on December 17th, and the body thinks there's not information. It could be tabled to a January meeting, if anybody would want to do that.
It's your wishes.
So again, how about this, a compromise? On December 17th, can it be brought up to us as these are now the new changes to, the small changes to this ordinance? I guess that's the last meeting though, right, of 2024?
Right.
Can we chime in, can we get a chime in from Vice Mayor Ballard? We'll come back to this item.
Sure.
Before the end of workshop, and I'll text Vice Mayor Ballard to ask her when she wishes to see this, and she'll be the tiebreaker.
I think just so that we understand the alternative I think is January 14th. So it's either December 17th or January 14th. Okay. Thank you. Mayor, if you're ready to move on to the next item.
Bob, can I just make one more question?
Yes.
Either way is really, like I said, if the will of the body is in December, I can be flexible with whatever. I just liked the idea of more data collection. But if it's December, I'm fine with that too. I didn't want it to seem like, you know, it was a house divided, if you will. I think we all know that it's coming, and you know, we appreciate that. So I'll be flexible, whatever's best for staff and for the body.
All right. Mayor, the second item that we have today is to bring you up to speed and actually also the community on the current status of our water supply, talk about where we are with the drought, and some actions that we're considering to position us for water supply resiliency as we go forward into the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gary Jansen.
Thank you, Bob. Shannon, do I have this PowerPoint? Oh, hey. Again, Mayor and council members, Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities. I wanted to provide an update on where we're currently at on our drought outlook, where we've been recently, especially in light of the fact that we had record precipitation in November. That's brought a lot of questions from the public and others, including, are we out of the drought? Are we coming out of stage 2 restrictions? The answer is no to both. But I'll talk about that some more. This presentation you're going to see, you've seen quite a bit of this. I made the same presentation at the Governor's Water Conference a couple weeks ago as part of a panel to talk about long-term water supply resiliency statewide. There was a lot of interest in hearing what's going on in the Wichita area and the region, because most people don't understand, had not realized what specifically is going on with us and the impact of the drought on Cheney Reservoir. But I want to talk too about some of our thoughts for long-term strategic planning, what the future might look like, regardless of when we happen to come out of this drought. You've heard me talk before about we really need to change our culture of our community going forward. We need to change how we look at water conservation and probably never go back to where we were. So I'll just show this real quick. You're aware of our raw water sources. Cheney Lake I'll talk about more in a minute. Equisped's well field is still doing good for a lot of the reasons we've talked about in the past. I do want to mention what our long-term strategy is with ASR, which is a big component of keeping our Equispeds in great shape and healthy. We do have some improvements to our local well field also. Right now, there's some restrictions on how much groundwater we can treat. I'll talk about, I mentioned this again, about the value that our new treatment plant brings. We talked at workshop with the council probably about a month ago about the future of our current water treatment plant. I do have some information that we've put together to come back to the council soon, as we will be making a formal presentation sometime in January about the recommendation for the future of the plant, which we talked about before, is to maintain that plant for emergency operations, to be able to bring it online within 24 hours. We'll have a more formal presentation on that soon. Quick reminder, we do still provide water, even with the new plant, to 11 wholesale customers, 500,000 residents. That's 1 in every 6 Kansans. Cheney pool condition. In spite of the rain has helped, right? We've had some rains over the last 30 days. November set a record for precipitation. The lake level came up almost a foot. In fact, just a little bit over a foot, but we're still 7.5 feet low. So we've got a long, long ways to go. I'll talk about our drought stages in just a moment and what that means. We are still predicting, based on the current levels, that we could reach stage 3 of the drought response plan late next year. But we don't expect to necessarily see a lot of impact over the winter, but you never know. Last Thanksgiving, we had major snowstorm, probably would have some impact, but we'll see what happens. I noticed looking at the Corps of Engineers page for Cheney, even this time of year, we still see fairly considerable evaporation that's impacting the lake level. So again, the rain has helped. Every single day that it rained, we got calls, we got media requests. We're in better shape. Are we good? Are we going to be lifting restrictions? And we're not, because we just have so far to go to really make a dent in this. You've seen this slide before. I won't spend a lot of time on it. We still get questions about why do we don't go in and dredge Cheney? Why don't we make a bigger hole so that we can put more water in it? I heard Tom Stiles with KDHE at the Governor's Water Conference talk about dredging as a lose-lose situation. It's expensive. You've got to find some place to put the material. It just doesn't have much impact. The fact of the matter is, the City Council and staff's recommended investments in watershed protection measures over a lot of years have made a big, big difference in limiting the sedimentation into Cheney. Cheney's 4th from the left on the amount of sedimentation, so there's really not a lot to do. Picture on the right shows our dam. I've talked before about one of the silver linings of this drought is being able to make repairs to the dam. We had interviews for construction manager at risk last week. We expect to have an item to council in January for approving that contract, moving forward as quick as we can, most likely by the end of January. We still are a foot below where we need to be to start the work, so we're in good shape at this point. I know it's not on here, but I want to mention El Dorado real quick too. El Dorado continues to be a question, and just as a quick reminder, we've done numerous studies over the years. El Dorado Reservoir, when we can get water from the reservoir is not when we need it. So when we get into the point of a drought where we really would need or could use additional water, El Dorado Reservoir is just not available. So it's not going to work now. It's not going to work in the future. People have gone way back in time and talked about building a pipeline. The return on investment's not there, mostly because the water availability is not there. I wanted to show this current governor's drought emergency declaration map. In the last week or two, we saw some local meteorologists that put out what's called the U.S. Drought Monitor map, which looks at numerous conditions across the United States. And the local weather meteorologists, made a comment that Wichita is out of the drought based on the rain that we had. You could maybe say that there's some conditions with Wichita itself that are a lot better than they were based on what they measure. We're not out of the drought. Comms team did a good job of responding, saying that's not true. This map, I think, is very important because it shows that we have a significant issue still here in this area, one that a lot of people don't recognize. You know, I've said it before through the course of this. There's probably a lot of folks in our community who have never even been to Cheney Reservoir, which creates challenges with messaging and understanding what our real issue is. It's out of sight, it's out of mind, it's 20 miles away, it's raining here, we're good. That's got to be part of our messaging, continuing going forward. Everybody's probably tired of hearing about Cheney at this point, but when I speak about this in other areas, including we had a meeting at WABA last week that I'll talk about in just a moment, I think there were some folks that still didn't fully understand that then. Our drought response plan, I won't spend a lot of time on this. I think you're all aware that there's 4 stages. We're currently in stage 2. This is, as a reminder, an 8-year plan. This drought response plan was put in place on the heels of coming out of the 2013 drought. It's meant to carry us through 8 years of a Dust Bowl type drought. It's doing what we need it to do. It's doing what we expected. The stage 2 restrictions have provided some relief. It's not meant to stabilize Cheney Reservoir levels. It's meant to stretch our supply over 8 years. We're confident it's going to continue to do that. It's working the way we need it to. I want to mention real quick, how do we make a determination of when we come out of these stages? Quite simply, the way the ordinance is set up, and we think makes sense, is we've got to be out of stage 1 for a 12-month average, meaning that we've got to be about 90% of the conservation pool for the 12-month average before we would come out of any restrictions, especially for the stage 2. Reason being, I think you'll recall, especially over the last 12 months and since last summer, the lake level can drop in a hurry. It fluctuates a lot. I mentioned evaporation is a big deal even this time of year. Even with the rains that we've had, I'm certain that come next spring, we're still going to be in drought 2 stage restrictions. And so that question's been asked a lot too. The lake came up, where are we at? It's really hard to predict. I'm going to spend some more time with staff in the coming weeks and see what we can look at, but there's so many factors at play. We've talked before about the long-term impacts of no rain in that basin. 600,000 acre watershed that feeds this reservoir was so dry. The first rains that we got, even the big rains, all it did was start to bring the moisture content up within the soil, and there was still no runoff. USGS said that the runoff into Cheney Reservoir before these last rains was the lowest it's been in 57 years. That's not long after Cheney Reservoir was built, so that's the challenge we're facing. So many factors, so we can't stand here today and say, when do we expect to come out of stage 2 drought restrictions, but I'm confident saying it's not anytime soon. Communication is still critical. Outreach is critical, especially through the winter months when water use is down, water demand is down. We all know that regardless of the drought, regardless of anything, the demand, we've seen the demand go back down just like it did last year. We have got to keep the messaging out there. We keep referring to SaveWichitaWater.com. Usually we have a ribbon across here that says we're in stage 2 drought restrictions. We will continue to do that. We will continue this dashboard to show the where we're at with the levels at Cheney, but we've got to keep that messaging out there. Over the course of the winter, we're going to continue to refine what our future plans look like. I mentioned a meeting at WABA, which I want to talk about in just a moment, as far as outreach to others. So what does our planning look like? And this is where staff's focus is going to continue to be through the winter. We believe there's changes that need to be made in perpetuity going forward that will not take us back to where we were. I think in 2013, we've talked about this before, that drought was effectively wiped out by 2 major rain events. I would guess several weeks later, most of the community acted as if there had never been a drought. We need to make sure we don't do that and we keep this to the forefront. Our ASR project, I think you're all aware of and have heard a lot about, will continue to be a major component of our drought resiliency plan and what it does for the Equispeds well field. The picture on the left shows the river intake structure. When the Little Ark River is at a high enough level, we take water in, we treat it, we put it into the aquifer. We did operate this phase of ASR several times with the rains, which was good. That helps keep the aquifer healthy. It does a lot of things to keep the aquifer at higher levels for all users. It does a lot of things for water quality with the nearby chloride plume. It also helps us build up credits for when we get into the late stages of a drought. So it's been great for us. The other thing that we're doing, especially in working in coordination with the Bureau of Reclamation, they were here probably 3 weeks ago to announce some additional funding for the recharge basin projects. Most of the water we put back into the ground with ASR is done through injection wells, not near as effective as these big basins can be. So these recharge basins are fairly expensive. That's why we've looked for and were able to receive support, financial support from the BOR. They allow us to speed up post-drought recovery with EquiSped. If there's challenges, again, it keeps everything a lot fuller for when we need the water. It also does a lot of good things for water quality. So we had another opportunity to talk to BOR about something else that I want to get to in just a moment while they were here, which was really good. So this is part of our ongoing resiliency plans, always has been, always will, that we're protecting our resources and protecting our long-term water supply. You know everything about the Wichita Water Works water treatment plant. We do have some water going through the plant now, still working on some functional testing, getting pretty close to performance testing, working through a lot of kinks right now, a lot of parts, a lot of things happening at the plant, getting close to being where we need to be at staffing. When we come online sometime in the spring, you've heard us talk before about the flexibility that this plant provides, that we can treat more and theoretically up to 100% groundwater, which you can't do now. It's not going to happen right away. That's going to be a slow process to get to that point, but we will be able to, at some time, take more stress off of Cheney as the drought continues, if the drought continues, and start utilizing more of our raw water supply within the Equus beds. So I want to talk specifically about a couple of planning efforts that we're really pushing on for now and for the future that we think could make a big difference when looking at long-term water resiliency, response to droughts in the future. We have a reuse feasibility study that will be underway in early 2025. In fact, I think the RFP for this should be on the street in the coming weeks. It's going to look at direct potable reuse, more industrial reuse. It's going to look at ways that we can provide supplemental water for irrigation and to contractors. I've got a map on the next slide I'm going to come back to and talk about that more. The second part of this is to look at legacy landscaping and development practices. We had a meeting with Wichita Area Builders Association, really good turnout last week. Development and building community there. Councilmember Tuttle was able to join. Scott Weddle was there. So we talked about several things. Within our zoning code, there are some requirements for landscaping, especially with commercial properties and anytime you have dissimilar zoning. So whenever you've got commercial zoning next to residential, there's a required buffer that includes landscaping. It includes sod, trees. Now, while the city doesn't dictate what type that is, I think we all know most people want to go with fescue sod and things that take more water. So one of our efforts going forward is to really promote and find ways to look at xeriscape type landscaping, more drought tolerant type landscaping. We talk about water use over the year. Approximately 20% of our total volume of water use is during the summer months. A lot of that is outdoor irrigation. We're not any different than a lot of communities, especially our size. The majority of people's lawns are fescue. That takes a lot of water, regardless of what we do. With future restrictions, it still takes more water than other grass types might. I asked the question of the development community, if there's anybody that's willing to take on a new development that they can promote as being more drought tolerant and don't allow fescue sod. It's a quality of life issue. They know it's going to be easier to sell houses with that, but that's something we really want to look at. There's some communities that have done that. We can't go in overnight and change out fescue yards to Buffalo or Bermuda, but I think we should take a really hard look at doing something different going forward. There's more to come with that. We agreed to have a smaller group to discuss that. While we were there, I'll tell you one thing that was asked about, continues to be asked about, is possible exemptions Folks call and say, I was planning on putting in a new yard. Can you give me 2 weeks to water it in? Our answer's been no. Our answer's going to continue to be no. I told them I don't mind discussing it and seeing what our options might be. One item I'm going to look at with you on the next slide may help with that. The community our size, the number of people that are going to ask for exemptions, I don't know how we possibly stay on top of that. I'm not sure how we enforce that without it getting completely out of hand. So right now we're sticking to that it's really safe to stay there.
Could I just make a real quick comment, Gary? So
Please.
while it's still relevant, this conversation between Gary and Scott and I came when we were in a council meeting, a couple months ago, and you had done a presentation on the drought, and then, an hour later, we had a zoning change and we were requiring them to plant just when we told them that we couldn't. And so I just want to applaud Scott and Gary for spending time with me and going through all of the zoning codes and making sure that anytime there's a modification that we can. And then, like Gary said last week at WABA, we met with WABA before with the staff, and then last week we made the presentation there. And I was pleasantly surprised how willing they were to cooperate, to ask really good and thoughtful questions. I think the idea of having the small group that we're formulating with them for early buy-in is going to be critical for this. And it just re-emphasized that this isn't just something that the city of Wichita can do in isolation. It's not the big C of the city of Wichita. It's going to be the little c, meaning the community, for us to be able to address this. So again, just kudos to you and to Scott, and also future partners who are going to be helping with this initiative.
Thank you for that. I wanted to walk you through this map real quick. This is the thing that excites me the most about the future and what we want to do potentially with our own, if we look at it with this reuse feasibility study. So what you're looking at here in the upper left is our Cowskin Creek wastewater treatment plant. Right in the middle, or you can see where Wichita Water Works is a new water treatment plant for some perspective. Right in the middle is our water center at Herman Hill Park, which treats groundwater contamination from Gilbert and Mosley and the North Industrial Corridor. Towards the right is our 4 Mile Creek treatment plant, which we took over from the county some time back. Very bottom center is our wastewater treatment plant 2 at the Arkansas River. Takes on most of our treatment for most of the community. The core of the community goes to plant 2. So that treated effluent, what goes through those plants, collectively is almost 40 million gallons a day. We have the water rights to all 40 million gallons, more or less. We want to look at what we can do for the future to utilize that better than sending it to the creeks and the streams right now. So there are communities in the country that have gone to direct potable reuse, which means they're finding a way to take that effluent back to their water treatment plant and treating it and sending it to the system. So I mentioned that we're roughly 40 million gallons a day. We may not be able to capture it all. Certainly that 26 million gallons a day at the bottom is something we're keeping a close eye on. Over the course of an entire year, we average treating and pumping 50 million gallons a day to the system. So you can imagine the impact we start to have if we create that supply for ourselves of any portion of this. So what our reuse feasibility study is going to look at is a variety of things. Again, direct potable reuse, finding a way through advanced treatment processes to be able to take that effluent that's going to the Ark River or wherever else, maybe back to our treatment plant. Maybe we build a separate facility down by plant 2 that treats it and puts it back into the system. It seems like a long haul. I'm just throwing you out the things we're considering. Maybe we find a way to take this effluent back to and put it in Cheney. That's a long ways to take a pipeline, but the reason why it's worth considering is because of the advanced treatment requirements. It's a little bit counterintuitive, especially to a guy like me who doesn't understand all the parts of this like someone like Don Henry does, but the effluent, the water that comes out of a wastewater treatment plant is actually considered too clean for potable use, and so you have to remineralize it is what they call it. There's things that you have to do. One of the big parts of this is that we would have to develop regulations with KDHE so that there are no regulations for direct potable reuse right now in Kansas because no one has taken this on. We want to be bold in our approach and look at everything that we can. So again, we're getting ready to hire a consultant. When we talk to the Bureau of Reclamation, I think they really embraced this and were excited to hear what we were looking at. They said funding is available for both programming and for implementation. So one of our efforts with a consultant that we hire is to help us find and identify potential funding and what that looks like. So bottom right, we talk about spirit reuse. You've all heard me talk about, we have a contract with them that they can utilize up to 385 million gallons a year. Million gallons a day over the course of a year that currently comes from Plant 2. We will look at more potential industrial reuse for water conservation. Probably what will come out of this, I hope, in the early stages, which has worked well in a lot of other states, is a pilot project to see what makes sense. I don't know if this does or not, but you can see again in the upper left that Cowskin Creek plant doesn't have near the capacity right now that the other facilities do, but maybe a pilot project to try to get some of that effluent as reuse to Wichita Water Works, maybe we try that first. I don't know, but there's a lot more to come. Certainly in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to really push on this. We're going to be aggressive and try to get to a point where we can. Talking about the water center in the middle real quick, one of the things that we're working on there is to try to revise our permit for that, where that water can be used. Right now, our operations within Public Works and Parks, they use some of that water now for what they do within their operations, including some watering of trees and landscaping, at least prior to the drought. We're trying to revise that potentially to where contractors in the community, landscapers, nurseries, whatever, may also have access to that water. I mentioned that at the WABA meeting. I think there's some interest with that. It's not ideal, but at least it's an opportunity to be able to provide a water source to them. So we're going to keep pushing on that. Kind of excited about what's happening there. There'll be more to come on that. Last 2 slides I have real quick is we're going to continue to look and see what other communities have done. City of Hayes has worked through some drought issues for many years now. They've got permanent restrictions in place. They prohibit watering during the heat of the day during the summer at all times, which is a really big deal, more so than most people would realize. They've got a deal that says you can't wash down hard surfaces at all. I used to have a neighbor that I think that went out every single day and hosed down his driveway, whether it needed it or not. That may not seem like much, but I think what happens with a lot of this is really changing the mindset, getting people to understand and recognize that we've got to do something different going forward, and having some of these things in place, I think really helps. We're going to be looking at recommendations probably come next spring that we think ought to be put in place here for Wichita. City of Oklahoma City has mandatory odd-even watering that's permanently in effect. They had an issue at one time with their distribution system, but also working through some drought. Oklahoma City now is watering every other day. Probably not a bad idea. The city of Denver, it's the last one I'll mention, where Jim Jonas came from, over the course of a significant drought, I think they're down to you can only water 3 days a week. Some of the enforcement becomes a challenge, but what I've heard from Oklahoma City is they've done it long enough now, it's just become a part of who they are. People abide by it, they do a great job with it. So we're going to keep looking at what others have done, talking to them, see what's been successful to help us out. Thank you. That was a lot. I think that's all I've got for now. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I've chatted with our sustainability board members, specifically my own, regarding a number of the things. I'd love to see the gray water pipe extended. I think it's interesting that there are no regulations, I guess, towards it or policy as far as what's able for, it's not human consumption, right? Like we can't use that for human consumption.
Currently, there are no regulations in Kansas for direct potable reuse for human consumption.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
That's just because no others have taken it on yet, but we're ready to do that.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to see, like I said, 30% I think of what Spirit uses as far as water use is recycled water from our treatment plant too. So I'd love to follow along on the conversation. I think just adding more of the purple pipe, going through the community where it makes sense, helping, using that water for car washes, which already has to do recycling, but water our golf courses with it. There's a number of uses I think that we definitely could follow through with. Also, they had pointed out with new builds, possibly doing some tax credits or incentives for the new builds and new developments to format their homes for future recycled water use if we ever do get recycled water lined up to any of these new developments. So that might be something to look into, is what we can do as far as tax credits and incentives to encourage that. Two quick questions. Are the projections for the drought that we're possibly going into stage 3 late next year, what does that look like as far as what we're planning with the new water treatment plant? If we ease up on the water coming out of Cheney, start using the Equus beds more, is that figured into the drought plan?
Not necessarily. Thank you, that's a really good question. Not knowing just yet when we can start making that shift. Again, even if the new plant comes online at some level this spring, we're not instantly we're still going to be running both plants through 2025 for a variety of reasons. So we're not going to be sending huge volumes through either plant, but it'll take us some time to get to where we're being able to switch over to more groundwater. Likely that won't have an impact right now, but as we see where we get through next year, that will start to become part of our projections.
Okay, the second question is, do any of our projections take into account some of the surrounding communities doing their own water treatment plants? I know it might be long-term, but Goddard's looking at it. I think Clearwater maybe, or I can't remember exactly what communities are.
So thank you for asking that too, because I actually had a note to mention that and totally skipped by it. Right now it doesn't, so the two that are looking at it that would impact us, that are currently our customers, is Derby. Derby has pretty considerable water rights, and they are working on a treatment facility that would come online in a couple of years. It would be primarily for the peak demands during the high months. They don't have enough water rights to come off of Wichita, but I talked about that's when we see the most water use, right? That's the reason why we went to stage 2 restrictions, because of the seasonal demands. That would help considerably. We don't have that in our projections just yet. It's several years out. City of Valley Center is planning to build a water treatment plant that effectively would come off of Wichita use. We're still working with them. I had a recent meeting with them. They're looking at projections. They don't have enough water rights right now to fully come off of Wichita. We still need to figure out, because I think they need water going through their system from us. Anyway, those are coming, not part of the projections yet. From a conservation standpoint, it can only help.
All right, thank you.
Gary, thank you. I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to say I appreciate the direction that we're going, looking at water reuse, because I think Wichita should be leading on that, which I said at the steering committee meeting. So I'm definitely in support of continuing to work toward that, and maybe Wichita can help design those guidelines throughout the state and show how it could work here in Wichita. And then also, I think I said this at a workshop too, but I think that we should really be looking at just conservation in general, like you said, happened in a couple other cities, and that's just kind of how Wichita operates. That way it's not a big deal when we hit a drought, because we're always working towards conservation, whether it's working with WABA, as you were doing, and continuing to encourage people to use less water and more natural grasses. Like, I know I have some fescue in my yard. I plan to get rid of all of that. Like, green yards are great, but keeping water supply in the city is more important. So I think the more we can do with that. I've sent some pictures I took in other places to comms, like at the Grand Canyon, they had water conservation on the little buses that we were on. So just all of that, I think, is a good thing for Wichita.
Thank you. I agree.
I just want to say, I echo both my colleagues, and the more that Wichita could lead on conservation efforts, the better. So thank you for all your work.
While we are on the topic of conservation, I wanted to know about the new water treatment plant and the testing that will happen. Will there be any opportunities to conserve that water or reuse that water?
We tried and tried and tried and could not find a safe and effective way to be able to capture that water. A lot of it has to do with what's happening right now with continued functional testing. Construction of the plant is done, but there's a lot of people on site, a lot of things happening. As we continue through functional testing and adding some water to the plant, we came to the realization from a safety standpoint, from a security standpoint, it would be really, really challenging to get anybody on that campus, on that site, even if we could find a way to capture that water. It's also intermittent, so the timing perspective would be a challenge for us to know necessarily. It'd be very short notice. This time of year too, there's not a lot of uses for water from a landscaping perspective. That's probably the last part of it. It just became to a point we couldn't find a way to do it feasibly, certainly without spending quite a bit of money and getting very little return. So unfortunately, we did not find a way to do that.
I see no further questions. Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
I have an update from Vice Mayor Ballard. She did respond back regarding the previous workshop item. She did say that she's good with either date, and then I heard Councilmember Becky Tuttle also say she's good with either date now. So may I propose December 17th? Thank you.
Mayor, we have 2 remaining items. Both are planning items and have been discussed previously by the council. Hopefully, we can push towards some consensus on both of these and get something formal to you.
Good morning, Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. On these 2 items, I'll try and keep it snappy on these, so please stop me if you got questions or would like me to pause. So the first one is on policy number 9. We're just here to check in with you, see if you have a preference on this one. The recommended action right now is, of course, ask questions, provide feedback, as always. In terms of how we'll go through it, I'll cover all of these items. I'll talk about the issue, the background, current practice, and potential changes. In terms of the issue, why is this item before you? It's because questions have come up in the past about why particular items, generally what are considered non-controversial zoning items, are being presented on the non-consent agenda. And that has really raised the question about should there be modifications to policy number 9. Since 2020, there have been multiple cases on the non-consent agenda, and in these situations, these have occurred because there's been one protest against the application. And in a lot of these cases, both the DAB and in all of these cases, both the DAB and the MAPC are both recommending approval. It's the same recommendation. The sole reason why these items are showing up on the non-consent agenda is because of a single protest. Here's a map that illustrates one of these situations. Here's a single protest. It's outside of the protest area, which is the outline in green around the property. Likewise, here's another property where the protest was outside of the protest area, again, causing both of these to be non-consent. Here's an illustration from another case. I know the map's a little bit different, but it illustrates the same point, which is a protest outside of the protest area. So, and again, the sole reason why these were presented on the non-consent agenda. So as background, there are 2 things to keep in mind here. The first one is policy number 9, which is what we're talking about. The second one is practice. And I'll go through what the difference is on both of those. Policy number 9, it's been in place for quite some time. It was initially first adopted back in 1986, according to our records, and it was updated in 1996. So it looks like every 10 years just about visited. But what it does is it outlines that it's a council policy to not hold a public hearing considering an item which the MAPC has already heard. So that's why the zoning items, there's always that comment at the end about council policies not to accept public comment at this. In addition, it also has some additional information about specifying what information will be provided to you all at the council, what the appeals process is, and it refers to the CPOs, which are now DABs, so it just goes to show how long this has been in place. Now, on the other side though, so that's policy number 9. It talks about that generally there's not public comments taken at the city council level. The second thing that we have though is practice. And it is a practice about what gets assigned to your non-consent agenda and what goes on consent. There's not really a formal policy on this. So at this time, anytime that a case receives a protest or if the DAB and MAPC recommendations are different, then it shows up on your non-consent agenda. So potential changes. Potential changes are outlined in the documents that were included as part of this. It's a revised and updated policy number 9. So first off, things that are being kept the same. So what's being kept the same or proposed to be kept the same is that the public hearings would be at the MAPC and not at City Council. Given the length of the MAPC meetings, I don't know that you want to go through all that a second time. And then materials, the materials that would be provided to the City Council continue to be outlined, as well as the protest and appeals process, which mirror what's in the zoning code. So all of that would be kept the same. Potential changes include the following: that it would be non-consent if any one of the following was true, that protest petitions were submitted representing more than 20% of the protest area, that the DAB and MAPC recommendations are different, or if there's an appeal, and this is by the applicant. So in these 3 situations, the case would be put on the non-consent agenda. And with a note that, of course, City Council can always pull an item off the consent agenda to place it, to hear it. Another note that I would make is that we're starting out, we presented the 20% threshold because that's what matches state statute in terms of modifying the vote that's required for a zoning case to be approved. But you could that could be changed. That could be 5% of the protest area. It could be 10%. We just started out with 20% for the case, in the case of discussion. So it's it's a small PowerPoint, but that's the discussion at this point. I'll stand for any questions.
No questions, just a quick thought. Regarding the single protest, I agree in principle that I don't need anybody from District 5 weighing in on South Wichita, just District 5, for example, weighing in on something in my neighborhood. However, I do feel like there might be a reasonable boundary to let that single protest move it from consent, just because you might be 300 feet away. That still impacts your neighborhood. So I don't know what the will of the rest of council is on that, but I do find that there might be an appropriate boundary for the protest and pull it from consent. So again, just my 2 cents on this, giving people in the neighborhood a little more opportunity to bring this in front of council.
Yeah, I agree with my colleague on that. I struggle with, because I think it's happened to me a few times, someone across the river submitting a valid or a protest against a zoning item. But like Councilmember Hoheisel said, I do struggle as well as if somebody is within, well, I've been pushing 400 or 500 foot notification. So if somebody is adjacent enough to it, I do think it should be valid. And I don't know if there's a way to, I guess, word that, or if it's something across the city, I don't think it should pull it off.
Okay.
But I don't know if there's a way to
There
change
is.
that.
We can explore that.
Okay.
I probably echo both of them. If it's close, yeah. If it's, outside of it, I don't really care as much, but I'm open to more discussion around that. DAB and MPC recommendations are different. Yeah, I think that should probably go on there. So, thank you.
And Scott, the only time I've ever had something like that kind of wonky happen was when the item was in my district and the person's business was next to the zoning change, but they lived in district, whatever. So, we could go down a rabbit hole with a million different kinds of exemptions, but, I just think it's an interesting discussion to have. And I definitely agree when the MABC and DAB recommendations are different and then for appeals. So thank you.
I have a question. If a person's business is next to it, they can submit a valid protest. Is that correct?
Yes, they can. It would be based on the property owner. So as long as they own the property, yes, sir.
Okay. I wouldn't mind maybe widening it a little bit, over 200, but I don't think somebody a mile away should have much say in it. So especially when the neighbors next to it don't have a problem with it.
Mayor, Scott, I think this dovetails with your second item too, right, in terms of the notification area, what Councilmember Johnston just talked about.
Yes, sir, very much
Okay,
so.
Yep.
Well, if I may, what I'm hearing, I want to reflect back what I'm hearing to make sure I got it correct. I get the sense that members are comfortable with a policy like this, but they would like to see it calibrated better to reflect that if a protest is received and it's within a certain geography that's considered near to the site, that would trigger it to go non-consent. But recognizing that on the flip side, if there's a protest that's received and it's further away, then it should not trigger it automatically going to the non-consent agenda. Okay.
I could even, well, speaking for myself, more specifically, I would say if it's past 1,000 feet, it shouldn't. If it's within 1,000 feet, that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Are we ready for the next one? Okay, well, I guess that's what we have for right now. We do have another PowerPoint, but it's quite large, and it's not absolutely necessary that it be covered today. It looks like we don't have that one available right now. So, okay. I do not. I've got one copy for myself. I'm sorry if there's not another one.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think we should push through.
Scott, I think they're saying they like the presentation even if you don't have the PowerPoint slides.
Oh, yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Okay, very well. So what I'd like to speak with you about today is the zoning notification letters. This is an item that a number of you have seen before, but to others, you have not. Thank you, sir. So there are a number of considerations to be covered with this. The first is distance. The second one is recipients, who receives it. A third one is the languages that are contained in the letter. And then the fourth one is the letter content or even the letter format. Last time that we were here, we received feedback to go out to the DABs and collect input. We've done that. It was sometime earlier this year. And so I'm here to report back and also to see if there's a consensus about how to move forward. Interest in this has been expressed by members of the Wichita Independent Neighborhoods, members of the public at DAB meetings, and also by council members at some of the council meetings. In terms of process, we've taken it to the MAPC Advanced Plans. We've also taken it to the City Council Workshop in July of 2023, and then to the District Advisory Board meetings. And the DAB meetings were held, they were at the DAB meetings in February through April, so earlier this year. In terms of our current practice, there are multiple ways that we provide notification about cases. That's done through the publication, which used to be in the newspaper, but now formally online, as well as the note in the paper. Emails, which are a courtesy notice, yard signs, which are done by MAPC policy, and the letters, which are required by state statute. In addition, we also post information on our website in terms of the agendas and information that folks can look up on specific cases about where they are and the details. In terms of the notification letter, again, that's required by state statute. Per state statute, city cases require a 200-foot distance for those letters to be sent. In a county, for a county case, it's 1,000 feet. In the city of Wichita, has a policy that it varies between 200 and 1,000 feet depending on the size of the subject site that is being rezoned. And that, yes, sir? Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have the slides, so I'll do the best that I can to illustrate that for you, or at least describe it. Okay, yeah, sorry, sir. So for up to 1 acre, it's 200 feet, but if you go over 25 acres, then it's 1,000 feet. And the distances range from 200 to 350 to 500, 750 to 1,000 feet. In terms of the letter, it is sent to the property owner, and we also send a courtesy copy to any HOAs or neighborhood associations that are in the notification area as a courtesy. Now, they have to be registered with the city of Wichita, and so they have to keep their information up to date. In terms of the addresses, the applicants are responsible for purchasing the addresses from a title company, as done for a variety of reasons. but is required as part of the application form. In terms of the protest area, the notification area and the protest area, there are two differences, and I'd like to point that out. So there's a protest area, which we saw on a graphic, and I think I'll bring that up if I can. Okay, so in this case, you can see the protest area, which is outlined in green. The notification area is outlined in purple. You can see that they're different sizes. The protest area, of course, is required by state, and it can change the city council vote requirements. So it can require you to have a 6 out of 7 vote in order to approve a zone change. The notification, as you can see here, can be greater by that city policy, and it does not change the vote requirements. So that's the background. Now the question had come up about distances and how far should these notifications be sent. We checked in with other Kansas communities, and what we found, and there's a list of at least 8 of them that we researched, the overwhelming majority, all but one of them, send it to 200 feet. They do not send it beyond that. One does send it beyond that, and that is Lawrence, which goes out 400 feet. We also did some research to look at communities outside of Kansas, ranging from Kansas City, Missouri, Fayetteville, Bentonville, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Des Moines, West Des Moines, Denver, Broomfield, so an assortment. And what we found is that the majority of those cities send them a range of 200 to 300 feet. An outlier was Broomfield, which sent them up to 1,000 feet. And there are nuances to this as well. I won't go into those today, but there are nuances to how each of those applies those distances. So what we did was we did a review of possible distances, and we took Riverside, the area near 27th and Meridian, and an area near Central and Woodlawn to measure what would be the effect of expanding the notification area. At 200 feet, in one example, 200-foot distance resulted in 28 addresses that would be notified. If we expanded that to 1,000 feet, it would be 344 addresses. And the reason why is because it's exponential, because you're talking about area, not just a straight linear in terms of doubling and multiplying. Likewise, a similar thing was found for the other locations that we looked at. So when it came to the cost implications, for an applicant, when they go to a title company to request the addresses, it's $175 for 10 addresses. For each additional address, it is an additional $18. For the planning department, our costs are about $2.64 for every letter that gets sent out. So the cost implications of increasing the notification area in these examples are as follows. In the Riverside example, with 33 addresses, the cost to the applicant was $594 to secure those addresses. The cost to the planning department was $87. Using that same example, if we go out to 500 feet, it's 114 addresses. It's $2,000.52 for the applicant to purchase the addresses from the title company, and it's $301 for the planning department to send those letters out. If we expand that out to 1,000 feet, it's 390 addresses at a cost of $7,020 for the applicant to purchase the addresses, and a cost to the planning department of $1,000 to mail those out. And that's just one example. We have 3, but they follow a similar pattern as the increase in cost as you go further out. So on that topic, so we took that out to the DABs to collect feedback. You can see the attached minutes. I think that was included as part of your packet for this item. In terms of the feedback that we received, DAB 1 was interested in seeing if we could, and I'm just summarizing very briefly here, DAB 1 was interested to see if there were opportunities to reduce the cost of notification. DAB 2 was interested in increasing the notification area, at least some of the members of the DAB, but it was a range of 500 to 1,000 feet. DAB 3 was interested in exploring opportunities to set a minimum notification of 10 properties and allowing the applicants to provide the list. And then DAB 4 was commented that extending the notification areas are too cost prohibitive and perhaps looking at a residential or commercial 2-tiered system. So one system for residential, one system for commercial. DAB 5 members indicated they were opposed to increasing the notification area due to cost. And DAB 6 members commented about increasing the distance to a 500-foot minimum. So the comments that we received were not very uniform. They were a variety of opinions. And so hence why I'm here before you, just checking in to say these are the comments that we collected and to check and see if you have any questions or comments or thoughts on that. We also have, that's notification area. I do want to note that we have who it goes to, what languages and other things, but I want to pause as we're talking just about distances for this one.
So I'm not supportive, like I said before, of the 1,000 just due to the cost, but I'm still supportive of the 500-foot because I think it reaches a lot of the folks who have some concerns that felt like they hadn't been reached out to before. My personal.
I'll chime in. I'm not interested in expanding the notification zone, but what I would be interested, excuse me, is if there was an increased cost. I know we let property owners know, and we offer the courtesy to HOAs and neighbor associations, but like a courtesy to renters. There's some people that have lived in a rental house for 20 years, and well, maybe it doesn't count as a protest. Maybe they should still have their opinion made within that area. So not interested in increasing the notification area, but perhaps adding renters as a part of that just for a courtesy.
Okay.
I'm the same as Councilman Glasscock. I think renters should know about it. And I think the posting of the signs allow the neighborhood to know. So I would not be in favor of increasing it.
Thank you. DAB 4's recommendations is kind of piquing my interest here about doing two different systems, one for commercial, because I think that's more the concerns that the neighborhood has. A quick question, if we went out to 500 feet or something around there, does that make it more difficult for concerned residents to meet that 20% threshold?
Good question. The protest area would remain the same as it is today. That's established by state statute, so we don't have the flexibility of modifying that. So
it's
just the notification.
Just notifications. Okay. I also agree with my colleagues about the renters getting some sort of notification, I guess, with it.
When this, I think, came before DAB 4, I think it was looking at maybe the commercial residential side. Not necessarily opposed to that, but the price jump is pretty significant. I'm just thinking of let's say it's a small business that's trying to rezone, $1,500 is still pretty significant, whether that's just someone trying to rezone a residential property or a business property. And honestly, some of the residential properties are rezoned by developers that are looking at doing it, opposed to some of the small business rezoning as an individual looking at doing it. So the cost probably makes me not as likely to do that, just because for a small business, a $1,500 increase is pretty significant.
I'll chime in. I didn't think we were talking about it yet, but I also support tenants being notified. That's another concern I've heard over the years.
I agree with my colleagues. I don't want to have anything that makes it harder to do business in Wichita. I think we want to be welcoming and inviting, and anytime we have someone who wants to invest in our community, I want to be as supportive of that as we can. I understand, some of the rationale, and oftentimes my DAB has concerns that maybe, more people should be notified. You and I have talked about this a lot, Scott, just yesterday. A lot of the times it's people's fear of, what could happen or what's going to happen, when we really have to be focusing on what's the most appropriate use of the land and not all of the other things that sometimes come into the discussions at my district advisory board meetings. So, a little bit different philosophy myself than what my district advisory board expressed. But again, I just want to make sure that we're making it as easy as we can to do business in the city. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
I'll chime in real quick. What I'm hearing in summary, I think, is standing as is, but having the provision of allowing renters to also get notified. So that seems like a compromise, and I think possibly a consensus of not changing the actual feet, but rather adding the renters. And I would also want to know, what would that cost be in order to notify renters?
That's a great segue into the next item, if you're okay with that.
Just one more thing, just to say it, because this was the main thing I've been pushing for years. A lot of the concern is just that neighborhoods feel like they should know what's going on in their neighborhood, whether they're 200 feet or really 1,000. In this case, I said 500, and the notification historically, until we change it, hadn't went to renters who want to know what's going on and how their community will be impacted. And also, if there was some form of, like a particular car wash that came on Woodlawn where the notification area did not hit any houses, just commercial, they want to know, because 500 foot would have hit them as well, that these things are coming and how it impacts their community. Whether they want to complain or support it, it's just the fact of knowing that something new is coming. And that has been a lot of the concern, and especially when there are some controversial things. If the will of the body is not to notify more people, then that is what it is. I will continue to say it should happen. But I think we're going to continue to hear from people who want to know what's going on in their community and how their neighborhoods will be impacted.
So with the topic of sending it to the property, the people who are living at the property, not just the property owner. So if the property owner is in Texas or Florida, it goes to them currently, interest in sending it to the property. What we found in doing our research and cost is that it's an additional $2 for the applicant to pay to get the address of the property, not just where the property owner lives. And also, again, that each additional letter is another $2.64. We looked at a typical example for notifications that we send out of 30 properties. So 30 times 2 is another $60 for the applicant. And for the planning department, if you assume that we would look at the addresses and find out where they don't match, and that would be where we would send out additional letters. It wouldn't be for all 30. If we assume that 20% of the 30 are renters, then we would be looking at another $15, $16 for distribution. So the costs are a lot smaller than they are for a greater increase in distance. We did take this one out to the DABs as well for comments. It was mixed. DAB 1 mostly indicated that they were in favor. DAB 2 had some members that were in favor. There were others that were opposed. DAB 3 likewise had some members in favor, others opposed. DAB 4 did not have any suggestions on this particular topic. DAB 5 was not in favor of notifying tenants, and then DAB 6 also did not have any recommendations. So just so you know how it came back from the DABs. At this point, if there's any additional questions or comments, I think so far it sounds like there seems to be some support for sending it out to renters as well. Okay. In terms of languages, languages is an interesting one, and it is currently evolving. I just got some information yesterday about this. There were some concerns about due process in terms of if we were going to be providing information in other languages, would we translate it correctly? Could that cause harm if we didn't get that right? I just want to update you that that conversation is still ongoing. I will provide you with the update from the DAB, but at this time, I don't believe that I have enough information to tell you one way or the other whether or not that's an issue, but we'll continue to explore it. So I do want to provide you an update to let you know that we are working on it, but it continues to evolve. The feedback that we got from the DAB is DAB 1 said, please do use a translation service. So if someone needs to get the information, it can be translated for them. DAB 2 is in favor of additional languages, at least an informational sentence to reference people to the correct location to get more info. DAB 3 and DAB 4 had no specific suggestions. DAB 5 was opposed. They said stick with the way that it is now. And DAB 6 was in favor of other languages. So again, kind of across the board on that one.
Could I offer a brief comment
Yes,
on that? I'd probably be in favor, maybe a language at the bottom of how to find this in other languages, because I know our website translates to whatever 100 languages. That might be an interest, because we don't know what 100 languages it's being sent out to and what home is speaking whatever language. So if we could have a link out, I think that's a way to still keep people informed. I don't know how you do that, letting people know in different languages that it may be available in their language, but that might be one way to do it.
I am still in favor of Wichita's top 3 or 4 languages being used for the entire notification.
What would be the cost for both your department and also for the applicant?
Yes, so for the applicant, unless there's a specific fee under our current model of how we charge for cases, there would be no additional cost, but there would be additional costs incurred by the department for that translation. And it would depend how we do it. Do we rely on a service like Google Translate or something like that, or is there a subscription service that we would subscribe to? That would be something that I'll have to look more into. At this point, again, it's evolving, so we had looked into it, found that there were some issues, but recently have gotten some different information. It's contrary to what we had before, so we're going to continue to work through this one. Are you ready for another topic? Okay, this is the last one. This is about the letter content. So if you're familiar with the zoning letter, it's about 3 to 4 pages. It has a whole list of all of our zoning classifications. It's got a map of the site. There's some really handy information in there, but I think we've also gotten some feedback that there's some confusing information in there. So we have looked at how to streamline that. It's, again, still a work in progress. We're down to about 2 to 3 pages. Includes content like a map, the information about the subject site and that, but we're trying to present it in a way that's more easily understood. I don't want you to have a doctorate degree in order to be able to understand what the zoning letter is trying to communicate to you. We continue to work on that. We did get some feedback from the DABs that were generally supportive of it, but there was a specific topic that came up at the last City Council workshop, and that was the option of using a postcard instead of a letter. And we looked into that, and it took quite a bit of work to get the finances on that one. But what we found is that by looking at our averages and how many we send out, and also the amount of text that's included, we discovered that we could only use the postcard for locations outside of the protest area for a case. And the reason why is because if you're in the protest area, we need to get you information about how to protest and some more specific information. It just simply would not fit on a postcard. So that kind of narrowed where that postcard could be used. Then we ran the numbers on what it would look like to order those and the cost. We came out with an estimated annual savings of about $1,600. And I want to caution folks that that's what it came out with on paper. If we were to implement doing a postcard, my concern would be that those savings would rapidly be eaten up by staff time trying to switch gears. And now we're doing a postcard over here, but we're doing a letter here. So I just want to caution that I think the numbers are so close that I don't have a lot of confidence that we would see ultimately savings out of that. But I do want to let you know that we looked into it. We explored what other communities are doing. We did not find another city. We found one that was doing postcards, and again, that was Broomfield, Colorado, but it was only in special circumstances. They don't do it as a standard practice. So my wrap up on that is we're looking into streamlining our letter, making it easier to understand. We're still a work in progress on that. And then number 2, we looked into the postcard, and again, some cautions about what we found out with the numbers.
With that postcard, would that apply to the applicant as well, with what they would send out?
For them, there would be no change because they would still be providing us with the addresses. What would change though is our cost to distribute it, because the printing costs are slightly lower if we're printing in a high volume of postcards, as well as the mailing cost to get it distributed.
So there's no savings for the applicant?
No, not for the applicant.
If we expanded it to, like, let's say 500 feet, would there be savings on that for the applicant, or is this strictly in-house?
It's strictly in-house, yes, sir.
Okay, appreciate it.
Scott, I would defer to your judgment. You're in the trenches every day, so you know how things work. So I would probably concur that there won't be any savings. It's just harder for your staff to manage it, so thank you.
And that's all. So we had those topics. So thank you very much for your time and the input.
Mayor, that's all we have for workshop.
Okay, so we have executive session now, so I will read.
Oh, excuse me, excuse
sorry.
me once more, Mayor. If we could, this might be a good time for a brief recess so we can get set up. If you want to give yourself 10 or 15 minutes, that'd be fine to 10 minutes. And
10 minutes, so
to
in a-
recess, and then we'll come back, and then.
How about we
can make a
return
motion.
at noon?
That's fine. You can make a motion after the recess.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll return at noon after this little break.